Researchers told reporters that while the vast majority of film and television continues to portray thin, in-shape people, over 30% of Americans remain resolved in their effort to stand up to idealized images of men and women.
Every day, people are inundated with unvarying images of slim men and women, but millions of heroic Americans continue doing their best every day to maintain BMIs of 35 or higher. These people aren't afraid to fly in the face popular culture deems acceptable and bravely eat and drink whatever they want, whenever they want.
In other news, the nation's single men announce a plan to change their bed sheets by 2019. A woman who left the room crying earlier expects to jump back into the party just like that. And a courtroom artist is clearly infatuated with the bailiff. This 2.5-minute long session of immersion therapy is finally complete. Your crippling fear of watching video news recaps should no longer be a problem. For more, keep checking theonion.com.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live. It's talk radio that you control, and 603-283-6160 is the phone number here. That's 603-283-6160. And with you in the studio tonight, you've got me, Bonnie.
And Mr. Penguin.
And tonight we're talking about many different things, but one thing that's kind of breaking right as the show is starting today, this says it was last updated at 6:53, and it's only 7:06 now. Trump chose a VP, a vice president, and it's someone I've never heard of. Maybe you have. Senator J.D. Vance.
No.
Yep.
And I don't know much about him, but I believe he's only been like a 1 or 2 time senator, maybe?
Oh, wow.
Or rep or some sort of politician. So I don't think he's been around very long.
He definitely seems young. Apparently he's born in 85. So he's younger than Ian.
Yeah. A little bit younger than me, too.
So, J.D. Vance, he's a senator from, I think it said Ohio. Let's see. Yep, Ohio. And I had never heard of him. You had never heard of him. All we know about him so far is he's young. So, let's see what else it says about him. So far, as long as Donald Trump doesn't get killed before then, it looks like the two people who are going to be fighting for president of the United States empire, it affects us a little bit. So, I mean, it's interesting to talk about, are Donald Trump and Joe Biden. That's what it looks like so far. Joe Biden might get replaced. Donald Trump might get assassinated. We don't know. But so far, that's what it looks like. So it's interesting.
It's not looking very good for our for the U.S. for the U.S. empire right now, is it?
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, Joe, is senile, and Trump may end up dead.
Yeah, it seems like it's hanging by a thread. But
or maybe Joe will die. Maybe of natural causes. But
I know. I thought about that too. I was like, I bet that's going to be coming soon because it seems like they want to replace him. That's what lots of people are saying, at least, because it's like they never let him go be so senile so publicly, and then all of a sudden they just let him be super off the cuff and senile at the debate.
Do you know what his age is at this point? I mean, he's getting up there.
Looked it up recently. I think it's 89.
89? Wow. I mean, just the thought that we're gonna that the Democrats actually thought it was a good idea to present an 89-year-old for
81. Sorry.
81. Okay, 81 still.
Still.
It's still up there, but yeah.
It's older than all my grandmas that are alive.
I mean, you would think that would be kind of like somebody that old would be kind of beyond the cutoff point of somebody you would want to put forth for president. But I mean, even somebody in their 70s. I mean, you'd think you'd be looking at somebody maybe in their 50s or 60s. But by the time you hit like 70, and you're starting to get up there in age. So.
And Trump is also old. A lot of people forget about that.
Yeah, how old is Trump?
He's younger, but not by much. Let's see. Trump.
He's probably in his 70s if I had to guess.
78.
Yeah. Okay. So older, a little bit on the older side still. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Trump definitely seems like he's probably in his 70s. I think. Biden, definitely late 80s, early 90s.
So, those are the two people it looks like that Americans are going to be choosing between as a ruler as far as the empire goes, as far as the Fed goes. So I think it's kind of interesting to talk about who his VP will be. It almost seems to me like it never makes much of a difference.
Like in terms of who you vote for as far as president?
As far as who wins.
Yeah, no, and it's, you're very right about that. I mean, if you look at like different policies, like when it comes to the border, or you look at, taxes, Trump implemented, I keep saying this, and I'm sure I'm like a broken record on this show at this point, but, Trump implemented a 25% tariff in order to have a trade war with China.
Wow.
And not that this has helped us any, but anyway, but then he started off at 10%, then he upped it to 25%, and then he dropped it before the election, just before he left office. And then Joe got elected. And then what did Joe do? Joe immediately reinstitutes a 25% tariff.
Wow, I hadn't heard of that.
So yeah,
Exactly.
I mean, people have this idea that like, the left and the right are like somehow different, or, the
Super
Democrats and Republicans are somehow different. But if you look at their policies, or look at the Democrats with the border, I forget which Democrat it was, but she was saying something. She was saying something about, and I'm not even sure how she would have had an effect on it. But one of the Democrat politicians was saying that they were going to implement, they were going to open the border up basically to immigrants, and anybody could come and go. And then when she got into office, she was like, "Well, that's not what I meant."
Wow.
Like, but you literally said like open the border, and it was just like, wow, it's like, and the reason the Democrats were saying that had to do with, I think, the fact that I want to say, well, the Republicans, I guess, were doing like really bad stuff at the border. I don't even remember what it was that they were doing, but they were doing real bad stuff at the border, and basically like not letting immigrants in or something.
Putting kids in cages?
Yeah. It might have been like the kids in cages at the border thing that they were all upset about.
But
either
that
way,
Joe Biden still does, and people just don't talk about it anymore.
Right, and that's the thing. Like, and the point that I'm making here is that they not only they were all over the Democrats were all over the Republicans for doing bad stuff at the border, and then what did they do? Not only did they not open the border, but they literally instituted they kept the same exact policies and people in place as the prior administration. It's like, what good does it do voting for the opposing party if they're going to do the same things?
Yep, I agree. For the most part, they do very similar things.
It's not even similar. They're literally identical policies. They'll end up implementing, even bad ones, even ones that like didn't work. They'll implement, and even if the prior administration removed those policies when they didn't work, well, the next one just re-implements the same policy. It's like, what was the point? What was the point?
I can't see Joe Biden having done anything differently if he was president during the COVID stuff.
Yeah, they say they'll do different things, but then when you actually start like examining, what they actually do in practice, it's often not that different. It's like even with like the war and stuff, and don't get me wrong, like I get that, like, okay, so Trump maybe didn't enter us into any new wars, but you still end up having, Republicans tend to be, very pro-war, but then if you look at like Democrats, they actually will bring it, they'll actually enter us into wars. So it's
Joe
like
Biden has been like a crazy warmonger with like giving money to Ukraine and Israel
and the Clintons. Yep. Mm-hmm, yeah, definitely.
So anybody who thinks that the left is anti-war just seems to be not paying attention, at least to like what the presidents do, the people who become, boss of the military.
Certainly, at least like the Democrats and the Republicans, whether it's left or not, or left or right, I don't know, but certainly the Democrats and Republicans, the people that are being elected, are so similar that there's almost no point in. I don't want to say there's no point in voting, but at least at the presidential level, I'm not sure that it really makes that much of a difference.
One thing about Joe Biden is like, culturally, he seems to be really bad. And what I mean by that is he has made it to where people think of libertarians as domestic terrorists. His FBI, or maybe not the FBI, but his administration labeled libertarians domestic terrorists. And it's just, I feel like I've never gotten such negativity from the left until Joe Biden became president.
Well, I mean, that's because the libertarians are basically doing what the right or the conservative Republicans, I guess, or at least the Republicans have said in terms of taxation. The libertarians look at New Hampshire. Right, I think New Hampshire is really the only place you can look, anyway, to be honest, about what libertarians are actually doing. But the libertarians, we cut the budget in New Hampshire. We didn't cut taxes. We cut the budget. Okay. So you can cut taxes without cutting the budget. And what happens is you keep spending and you borrow money and then you have to pay it back later. Right. In terms of taxes, the libertarians actually cut the budget and they cut taxes. If you look at what the Republicans do, well, they say small government, blah, blah, blah.
They talk.
But then they go and they spend all this money on war and everything else. Right. And so it's like, you can cut taxes, increase the war budget, end up spending more money, but that's not that you're still growing government. And I think that's why the left is really afraid of libertarians versus, Republicans. They're not as afraid as Republicans because Republicans at the end of the day, they don't do anything more. I mean, they're basically doing the same thing the Democrats are doing. So they don't really have as much to be afraid of. But libertarians actually do some of the things that they're trying to do.
There's absolutely proof of that, at least in New Hampshire, in the fact that Democrats are actually begging Republicans to keep voting for Republicans instead of voting for libertarians who run as Republicans.
Yeah, you could definitely see that. The Democrats here definitely much prefer the Republicans to the libertarians, and I think it all goes back to the Democrats and the Republicans have much more in common than either the Republicans and libertarians or the Democrats and the libertarians.
But as far as the vice president, I don't think that's ever mattered at all. I don't think a choice in vice president has ever made someone win. I don't think it's ever made someone like, oh, this person's definitely going to lose now because of his running mate. It never makes any difference. It's always like a very milquetoast person.
Well, I mean, the vice president is basically a backup if the president gets killed or something to that effect. And I don't know if it's never had any impact as far as like, because I mean, obviously we have had some vice presidents become president as a result of, somebody dying or getting killed.
Yeah, no, I just mean as far as who gets elected.
Yeah, I think you're right on that one. It's not something that happens very often where a vice president ends up becoming president. So most people probably aren't thinking too much about it. And at the end of the day, I suspect there's a low chance that it could end up mattering later at some later point, but it's probably not, because most likely the president will survive his presidency and therefore the vice president will be relegated to a lesser role.
It just seems like they always choose somebody who's very just like no one really knows much about them. They're not like really popular or really hated. It's almost always one where I'm like, I have to Google who he is. So Donald Trump, this is according to the Washington Post. Donald Trump has chosen Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio as his running mate, selecting a rising star in the Republican Party and previously outspoken Trump critic, who in recent years has closely aligned himself with the former president.
Wait. He's a former Trump critic?
Yep.
So he doesn't like Trump.
Well, he used to.
He used to not like Trump, but now he likes Trump?
In recent years, he has closely aligned himself with the former president, it says. Yeah.
That is interesting.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know what he used to think about Trump and what he changed his mind on. So it says Trump announced his pick Monday afternoon on Truth Social, which is his, if you remember, it's like his Mastodon instance.
Yes.
It's like not federated or something.
Yeah, it's like a non-federated Mastodon instance. It's weird.
Trump announced his pick Monday on Truth Social. After a lengthy deliberation and thought, and considering the tremendous talents of many others, I have decided that the person best suited to assume the position of Vice President of the United States is Senator J.D. Vance of the great state of Ohio, Trump wrote. He praised Vance's education, credentials, and business expertise. Experience. The GOP ticket was official later in the day when Republicans officially nominated Trump and Vance at the start of their 4-day national convention here. Vance walked onto the convention floor with his wife, Usha Vance, by his side. The crowd chanted, JD. If elected in November, JD Vance, 39, would be one of the youngest vice presidents in history. He is a relative political newcomer, winning his Senate seat in 2022 after rising to prominence as an author who wrote a best-selling memoir. Wow, he's only 39 and he's written a memoir about himself? Is that what that usually means? Like stories about your life?
I don't know if that's a memoir. That would be like an autobiography, I would think.
Yeah, but I think a memoir is like just a piece
about your
of life.
memories or something like that. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's something not that far off though from it.
A historical account or biography written from personal knowledge or special sources. So it might not be like just about his life, but something in his life.
Yeah. I mean, but that is basically kind of like an autobiography. It would be a good question of how it differs from just a regular autobiography.
I don't know. Maybe like autobiography is your whole life, usually.
Yeah, maybe.
It
I don't know.
His selection adds a staunch defender of Trump's movement to the ticket, and some Republican observers said it could help solidify Trump's base of white working-class voters, particularly in the upper Midwest. Trump's choice for running mate was among the most closely watched decisions of his campaign, and has taken on new significance in the wake of an attempted assassination against Trump at a campaign rally in Saturday in Butler, Pennsylvania. So did you watch that?
Yeah, I saw the attempted assassination. It was interesting. It was interesting some of the things that people were saying too that like witnessed it, like that almost I don't want to go down the conspiracy route necessarily and say it was some sort of Democrat conspiracy, but it was interesting to hear that there was one guy who was saying how they did not have snipers on the roofs and on the surrounding buildings, or at least not to the degree that they normally do, I guess, which does kind of, make you wonder like what's going on here. And then the question is, was it the Democrats that wanted him out, or was it the Republicans who wanted him out and they were trying to assassinate him, if that's what was, going down? And then it's also kind of interesting is that they don't actually seem to have any, the shooter supposedly was like a Trumper or something, like he was pro-Trump or something. And so it was so weird.
They can just say any of that stuff though, like,
yeah.
I think he was pro-Trump. Apparently, both of his parents were social workers. Do you really think that's like a deeply Republican
kind
family?
Of a weird, yeah.
And they all live together.
But I mean, you do have to. I want to say you have to admit. I guess you don't have to admit, but I mean, I would think that, or my experience suggests that kids are often not necessarily gonna fall in line as far as their parents' politics. So that might not be that abnormal really for somebody who grew up with Democrat parents to end up with a Republican kid or something like that.
Another thing about it is he was wearing a shirt that is like the merchandise of a popular gun enthusiast. I don't know if it's a YouTuber or something.
I'm sure they're gonna make a huge thing out of that.
Yeah, but yeah. I think he probably wore that to like fit into the crowd, or that is a possible reason why he would wear that, just to fit into the crowd at a Trump rally.
Yeah. I don't know. It's these are always these kinds of situations. You always have to wonder if we'll ever really know what happened.
Right.
It's just like okay, so he has no political beliefs of his own, or if he does, then he was like a Trumper. So then why would he kill Trump?
Right.
Like I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It's almost like there was some sort of conspiracy and, the CIA was in on it.
He's
because
just an MK Ultra victim.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it was MK Ultra, kind of victim. I mean, this guy was how old? I don't think this guy was even old enough to be an MK Ultra victim, if I'm not mistaken. Wasn't he 20 or something?
Necessarily literally the same,
but okay, that kind of thing though. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, people can be, and this is the thing is, I wonder if they ever, the thing is with MK Ultra is that like they were trying to use drugs to accomplish their goals, but people can be manipulated without drugs.
Yeah,
so
the algorithm.
Yeah, I mean, it could just
Twitter.
be that like the CIA, let's say it was a conspiracy with the CIA, right? It could just be that the CIA, manipulated this young kid into like, I don't know, killing Trump somehow. And we just don't know how they might have done it. Maybe he was I mean, and the thing is,
Blackmailed.
I mean, the government often manipulates people into doing things that, they wouldn't have otherwise done. When it comes to like, they give people bombs, or this might be more FBI, but the FBI will give people bombs, and then like they'll surround that person. You'll have 8 other agents, and you'll end up forming a group. And the one person that's not not an agent in the group is the guy they're trying to target to get to go and do something. And then eventually the guy goes, he's given a bomb, and then he goes to plant the bomb, and they arrest him. And it's like, yeah. So you don't know if it's a situation like that
And
where
they have all this plausible deniability.
right, as long as there wasn't any messages, like any phone messages or anything like that can become get out there. That maybe that does explain how they were able to do it even without something like drugs or MK Ultra. There could be I suspect, but again, like they're going to try and prevent that from occurring, but there's still like little things. There are little indications that could have occurred, and I think just the fact that the media was reporting on people, and it wasn't like just one person, but a lot of people saw this guy actually climb up on the roof, and supposedly there was a police officer who confronted the guy too, the shooter, and he backed away when he was the gun apparently was pointed at him, the cop, that is, but the thing to point out here is it really wasn't law enforcement so much or police's job to protect Trump. That was the CIA's job to protect Trump.
You mean the Secret Service?
Secret Service, yeah. Sorry, yeah, I'm yeah, you're right. I'm misspeaking here. The Secret Service's job would have been to protect Trump. They're the ones who should have had the people on the roofs and things. So not the local police.
Yeah.
So
I always think it just seems like if you have to use the Secret Service as your protection, and then the government wants you dead, that's so easy for the government to like use a Secret Service person to get to you.
Yeah. And it's not
ultimately those people are loyal to the federal government, not
yeah,
just like that president.
Secret Service, CIA, they're all like they're not like loyal, I don't think, to a president. I mean,
Right.
the president gets elected,
so.
and then they're supposed to protect them. But what if they don't want to protect that
Yeah,
person?
what if they didn't
Right.
want that president?
Right, exactly. And they're
good at hiding it,
Yeah, right, exactly. So the question is like, who's really because then the question becomes who's actually in power, right? Like who is orchestrating the CIA? Who's actually in control?
Yep, I mean, those are probably also questions we'll never have answers to, but it's important to not just take everything at face value and think like, oh, exactly what the media is telling me must be the truth.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting too. Like, it doesn't seem like the media was like in on it, like as far as like the shooting or like or the cover up or anything like that. I don't think that if they were trying to cover it up and the media was in on it, like they would have reported on the people who saw the shooter, for example. I don't think those people would have been interviewed, just as an example, because that's just like a an indication that something might not have been quite right,
At first, they were saying stuff like loud noises heard at Trump rally, or Trump falls at Trump rally, and it's just like, why aren't you calling it what it is, like gunshots and he got shot? That's really
attempted
weird.
assassination, right?
603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live. More coming up. Don't go anywhere. 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live.
A congressman recently revealed that legislation totaling 2,900 pages and involving more than $1 trillion was available to members of Congress for less than 48 hours to study and consider. That's over 60 pages of legislation per hour. Do you think anyone read the entire bill? I'm Jim Babka with DownsizeDC.org. Consider a proposal buried in a 3,200-page, $388 billion bill, which would have empowered committee chairmen or their agents to examine Americans' tax returns. When this horrible provision came to light, no one claimed to know how it got into the bill. One congressman questioned said, "I didn't write it, I didn't approve it, I wasn't even consulted." If your attorney represented you this way, he might be disbarred. But this is how Congress represents you every day. That's why DownsizeDC.org has created the Read the Bills Act. You can force Congress to read their bills before they pass them at DownsizeDC.org.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm Sally Patterson. Donald Trump has chosen J.D. Vance as his running mate in America's 2024 presidential election. The former president made the announcement as Republicans gathered at the party's convention in the U.S. city of Milwaukee in Wisconsin. President Joe Biden's re-election campaign said Ohio Senator Vance will, quote, bend over backwards to enable Trump and his extreme MAGA agenda, even if it means breaking the law and no matter the harm to the American people. Caroline Malone reports.
Vance served in the US Marine Corps, ran a successful business, and has even written a memoir. The Trump campaign said he is a champion for the renewal of American manufacturing and has worked to defend and revive domestic automotive production. Vance has called for strong borders and for standing up to China. He's also a supporter of the traditional energy industry, oil and gas. Vance is a senator for Ohio, but does not have much other political experience. He's a young choice at just 39 years old.
At the convention, Trump also became the Republicans' official nominee. He's been the presumptive nominee for months, but has now secured the votes of enough delegates to lead the party into the general election. Meanwhile, a Florida judge has dismissed the criminal case against Trump on charges of mishandling top-secret documents. On Monday, Judge Aileen Cannon granted the defense motion to throw out the case because of how the special prosecutor was appointed. The ruling removes a major legal hurdle facing the former president ahead of November's election. Monday's events come just days after Trump survived an assassination attempt at a rally in the U.S. state of Pennsylvania. Investigations are underway into the possible motive behind the shooting, which killed one man attending the rally and critically injured two others. Benji Haya reports.
Whilst the politics plays out in Milwaukee, here in Washington, questions linger over how this shooting could have happened and why. The head of the Secret Service says her agency will comply fully with an independent review and congressional probes into Saturday's events, and that they're working to prevent an incident like this from ever taking place again. The Secret Service did kill the suspect, but only after he'd fired at Donald Trump. He also shot dead a bystander and injured others. Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas says the gunman should never have been allowed to get a direct line of sight to the former president, even from outside the rally's perimeter. The alleged assassin was 20-year-old Pennsylvania resident Thomas Matthew Crooks. His motive remains unknown. President Joe Biden's urging this fractured nation to resolve its differences at the ballot box, not with bullets, as he seeks to unite the country and avoid the bloodshed causing a cycle of violent vengeance and retribution.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
That you control, and 603-283-6160 is the phone number here. That's 603-283-6160. You can bring up whatever's on your mind. That's if you want to change the subject, you can change the subject. If you want to tell us what you think about what we're saying, it's up to you because it's Free Talk Live, and that number is 603-283-6160. And Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. With fees of less than a penny per transaction, Dash is made for spending. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges, including the decentralized Maya protocol and in multi-crypto wallets. Thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month for this sponsorship. It's easy to get and use Dash. You can learn more at dash.org. That's dash.org. And with you on Free Talk Live tonight, you've got me, Bonnie.
And Mr. Penguin.
And we haven't done the show together in quite a while. It's nice to be on the show with you again, Mr. Penguin.
Yeah, it has been a while, hasn't it?
I have been enjoying you on with Arya, too.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So what we've been talking about in this last hour was Trump has picked someone to be his running mate for this election. And as we know, the two people most likely to win the seat of the head of the feds, the head of the empire, are Joe Biden and Donald Trump. What?
Win?
The seat of the head of the empire. Win the seat, you know?
What one? They're both going to win?
No, the two people that are most likely. One of those two.
Oh, right.
Sorry.
Obviously. Yes, right.
Yeah, either him or Joe Biden.
Yeah, I was to say, like, one of what? Yeah, the chances of anybody else winning are pretty much close to zero.
Right. Like, I guess RFK is third, maybe. I don't even know that.
I mean, does anybody even know if RFK? Like, I didn't even know RFK was running.
I know he's running only because some libertarians talk about how they want RFK to be chosen for the they want to change the candidate to RFK. Like some whole states, like Colorado apparently is one of them. Colorado wants RFK to be changed to the candidate instead of Chase Oliver, who's currently the libertarian candidate.
I mean, I don't know that much about RFK. I just know he's definitely not a libertarian.
Right.
But yeah, like I could imagine that maybe he would be better than Trump or Biden, but I don't really know too much about his politics.
I really don't know if he'd be better than Trump because he's like anti-gun. Well, not that Trump is like great on guns, but
yeah. I mean, it's an interesting question. I mean, he could be more like more moderate. And I don't know, but then again, the question is, what would he? Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. It's like, if you don't support gun rights, does he then? I don't know. Then he sounds like he's more of a or I shouldn't say social, but more of a Democrat.
Yeah. I guess he's an independent, so he's not like he doesn't consider himself either one. But
see, to me, like,
he's not pro freedom.
Yeah, I mean, see, to me, like, independent, like, I mean, it doesn't necessarily. I mean, you have to be like, okay, you have to be like libertarian, obviously, but I mean, you can. I mean, there's like green, like in other countries, there's like the Green Party, right? And I think it's here in the United States too, but it's kind of like the Libertarian Party, in which never gets any votes, or not anywhere enough votes to matter as far as like president is concerned, at least.
Yeah, I never heard about the Green Party.
Yeah, I mean, the Green Party.
Stein,
I mean, I don't know. The Green Party is kind of taken over. It's almost like the Green Party has taken over the Democrat Party, though, to some degree. I mean, they've implemented I feel like the Democrats have implemented a lot of the things that the Green Party has wanted over the years. So
Green New Deal, whatever.
Yeah, like solar panels and subsidies and things of that nature. I mean, maybe they would go farther, but it seems like the Democrats have gone pretty far already as it is, to me. I mean, from my perspective, I guess. Like, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, as far as implementing regulations on industries in the name of environmentalism.
Yeah.
That Democrats do tons of that.
Yeah, right. So, like, I don't know. Like, it's an interesting question. And I wonder, as the Democrats have swinged more left, I'm wondering if that's kind of how the Greens kind of came to power, in a sense, or their policies, came to power. I don't know.
I just don't know much about the Green Party. I don't think RFK is going to win. Honestly, I think that if he's going to take votes away, quote unquote, from anyone, it would probably be Trump. So maybe that makes it more likely that Biden's going to win. But then again, I really just don't even think Biden's going to live that long. And I also think he'll get replaced.
My gut feeling is that Trump is going to win. I think the Democrats have just been so out there in terms of, what more moderate or independent voters, what would appeal to them. Honestly, that they don't understand. I think they completely failed to understand. This is I've had conversations with people on the left, and they couldn't understand that, like, the more independent voters, or more moderate voters are not going to look very kindly at the prosecutions of Trump. They're gonna see that as, undermining the people's choice, as opposed to being some sort of defense of democracy, right?
Yeah.
And it's they just can't seem to wrap their head around that, I think. And I could, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm the one who's wrong, but from what I've seen from people who are probably libertarian or people who are maybe more on the right, I don't think so. I think it's going to increase. It's going to increase because the only people I think that might vote Trump, that wouldn't normally, are probably like libertarians or maybe people I don't know. Like I don't think you're going to see the left start voting Trump, but it's those people in the middle that maybe would vote Biden, but might be on the fence.
I think like leftists think that Trump is literally Hitler and he wants trans people dead and he's so bad that they would absolutely never vote for him.
Right.
But it's possible that they're like checking out and not wanting to even vote.
It's that exaggeration. It's a manipulation, and I think people who are more independent or somewhere in the middle are going to be more likely to see that and be like, okay, you're being malicious by trying to create this story that isn't true, and it's obviously not true. And I'll say this: I think the right is doing some of the same, but I think the left has done it more to a greater degree. So
just characterizing Trump as like he's going to destroy democracy while also trying to keep people's choice away from them to vote for him.
I don't know. Like there's been I'm trying to think of some of the memes. I can't really think of any of the memes at the moment, but there's definitely been some memes of Trump. Memes. I'm trying to think if you call it memes. I guess memes on the right. No, I'm sorry. Memes of Joe Biden coming from more of the right that I thought, I mean, it looked one way, but I'm not sure that it was really anything other than propaganda.
Like the idea that he pooped his pants in France?
Yeah. I mean, that would be the other, let's see, that would be, yeah, okay, that might be an example. Yeah, because that would be the right doing something to the left. But
I watched the video and there's no indication that he pooped his pants. All he does is he like kind of stands still for a second, like kind of facing forward. Like if anything, it looks like he's like checking out of reality, but not that he's pooping his pants. Like,
yeah,
such a stretch.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know. It's just like one of these things where.
I'm no defender of Joe Biden either.
No. I'm not a fan of either Joe Biden or Trump. Neither of these guys, are candidates that we should be voting for. And I'm not likely to vote for either one of them. I will probably smile if Trump gets elected, only in that the left, some of the things that the left has done, the absurdities, the exaggerations have just been so over the top. It's like I won't be able to help myself but smile. And the thing is, I don't necessarily know that Trump being elected is going to be good, is necessarily going to be a good thing, because it probably will result in, like things like the Supreme Court swinging even more to the extreme right. And that can't be good for us. I can't conceive of that being good. We might get more gun freedom, but we're going to end up, I think we'll probably end up losing, more freedoms that, the left, wants. So like abortion, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's possible. I know that the Supreme Court did one thing that seemed kind of bad right before they did the Chevron decision, which was good. Well, they, took away the Chevron decision. Basically, the Chevron decision got all the way to the Supreme Court, and their appeal went through. I think that's how you'd say it. It's just like a real complicated way to say it, because the Chevron decision is something that happened in 1984, and then just last month, the Supreme Court looked at it and said, "Yeah, this was a bad decision," and overturned it.
I think we've had a lot of mixed decisions, and it just in the last couple of years. We had I think we had a bad decision as far as taxation is concerned, with sales tax being forced on, everybody has to pay sales tax now, no matter what just about if you order something on the internet. So yeah, so not in New Hampshire, because New Hampshire doesn't have a sales tax, but if you're living in another state, like let's say you're living in California and you order something from New Hampshire, you now have to pay a sales tax because the business is forced to collect no matter where you are.
Wow.
So
I hadn't heard of that.
Yeah. So but then of course we also have some of the things that the Supreme Court that have gone, in a more freedom direction, like, the gun laws now. and I'm trying to think what exactly changed, but
Yeah, I don't remember what exactly changed, but I know that they made some good gun decisions. And the reason I don't remember is because I'm not like a gun person.
I'm not a gun person either. And I also obviously am not I'm not a woman, so I don't like changes with abortion don't affect me that.
I'm not really against
either,
what they did with abortion. All they did was make it a states' rights issue, and I prefer that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm kind of mixed. I guess I'm kind of mixed on that. Like in that, I certainly would like to see the world have more freedom. And I don't necessarily think that's going to advance freedom, but at the same time, you're right as far as the states' rights things. Especially if that ends up applying to more stuff,
right? That's the biggest thing.
We'll end up with more freedom in New Hampshire, and so I can't complain about that.
And that's the thing. Like, if people want to live in Alabama where you can't get an abortion, I don't know if it's 0% abortion or what, but I don't care. If people want to live in Alabama where it's really hard to get an abortion, that's still a choice. Living there.
And the thing I think the thing that would be more bothersome to me is the laws that prohibit or they're trying to enact, whether or not they can actually effectively implement these laws that would restrict a woman from leaving a state that is against abortion to a state that isn't.
This seems
to
really
have an
hard
abortion.
to implement. Like,
I mean, yeah, like
so illegal.
Well, that seems like a restriction on your right to travel, your freedom to travel, and
right to privacy. Like, how did they know that you were pregnant when you left?
Well, I mean, even if you are, even if you leave, have an abortion, right? They don't they're literally prosecuting you for what's effectively a thought crime, because it's not you leaving the state that's illegal. It's you leaving the state for an abortion.
Right.
But they don't necessarily know why you left the state. All they know is that you had an abortion in another state, right?
Exactly.
So
they don't know your intention for leaving the state to begin with.
Right, exactly. So it's a thought crime. They can't really prove it, in most cases. What they might present the evidence that you had an abortion, and they might present evidence that you left the state. Sure, but it's then up to a jury to decide whether or not you act that the reason you left is because of the abortion, or it could just be some other reason, but they have no way of knowing what you were thinking. So, I mean, short of them actually introducing a message saying maybe a text message or something like that, but
where you admit it.
I mean, I suspect that in a lot of cases that probably they're not going to have evidence to that degree. Kind of like with the Crypto 6 case, like they made implications about what was going to happen, or what Ian was thinking, basically.
Because their whole...
But there was no evidence to him actually thinking that, right?
Exactly. Their entire case was saying that, this would be obvious to anyone. So since it should be obvious to him, we're going to assume that he knew X, Y, and Z was going on.
So conspiracy to launder money...
So stupid. Thought crime.
Yeah, is basically a thought crime. And then the problem I have with it, too, is that, he has every right to have an opinion on, he should be able to have an opinion in that he can believe that it's immoral for the government to restrict him from selling Bitcoin to a known drug dealer, right? He should be able to think that, yes, I should be able to do this. The problem is he didn't do it. He never did that.
He said,
so he complied with the law. So how can you then find him guilty of, conspiring to sell Bitcoin to a drug dealer when he didn't even do that? It just doesn't make any sense.
Well, one of the things I was going to say that the Supreme Court got wrong a couple weeks ago was, I believe that they got it wrong, was there's this whole case, and all of a sudden I forget what state it is, but there's a ton of people that
Was it a state Supreme Court?
No, but there's a bunch of people in this one state. Actually, maybe it's not only one state, but whatever. It's something versus Missouri. And it started off that, and then that state decided something bad, which was basically that the government it totally has the right to tell social media people, you have to crack down on people saying this and that during COVID. So
Okay.
the state of Missouri said that the government has the right to tell, like, basically censor speech and control businesses, the social media platforms. And that went all the way to the Supreme Court. And, well, right now, just one little piece of it. So one objection made it all the way to Supreme Court, and they struck it down. So it still has to, like, make it up there again. It's still up in the air, but it's just one, like, bat back to the the lower court. It's upholding the lower court's decision in at least one little part of it. And if this thing gets to the Supreme Court and they say, yeah, it's fine, it's like a really big free speech thing. I wish I could. Let me just pull up with
I think I understand what you're kind of getting at, and unfortunately we don't have the story up to be able to tell you the details here. But yeah, it sounds like a case where the state is censoring, trying to censor individuals or businesses in regards to something relating to COVID, and maybe it's something like saying things that the government doesn't believe are true or whatever. And ultimately, these are probably just opinions that people are giving, and the government wants to censor those opinions. And the question is whether or not they can. And so
listen to this spin. So it's called Murthy versus Missouri. It says the Supreme Court on Wednesday, not this Wednesday, this was written on June 26. The Supreme Court on Wednesday tossed out a lawsuit that sought to restrict the federal government's ability to communicate with social media companies about content moderation.
Oh, yeah, that one. Yeah.
Communicate. Wow.
Yeah, it's
they were straight up threatening people.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. So I can explain this a little bit, I think. So what was going on here is the government, some state governments, and some politicians and things were threatening social media companies, saying you need to censor people who are saying things that we don't like about COVID that we consider not to be factual, or something along that lines, or that aren't agreeing with us on whatever our stance is on this. Now, mind you, these things weren't even necessarily settled, right? Like, as far as like, are masks effective? Are they not effective? And if you actually look at it, the government's own what the government was saying was actually changing, at different points. In the beginning, they were saying, don't wear masks.
And
then they were saying, wear masks.
The government shouldn't be the arbiter of scientific truth.
Right. And that's another, that's obviously another, aspect of it. And ultimately, at the end of the day, when people are reading, messages on social media, they should be reading it within the confines of the fact that the people that they're generally, interacting with aren't like official sources. They're not necessarily, doctors. They're not necessarily experts in this or that. They're just giving you their opinion, right?
Yeah.
So you can't read. You can't. I mean, I guess you can read, some random person's opinion on something medical and be like, I believe that. But the problem is that, like, you should be weighting that. Like given that we have 12 years of like schooling, government mandated schooling in the United States, for the most part, there might be some exceptions in some states, but for the most part, you would think that weighing evidence, that's one of those things that you were supposed to learn. So this idea that like the government, we're all too naive to be able to do that. It just goes to show or prove that the government, education system has failed.
Yeah, that's such a good point, but I think that they succeeded in what their actual goal was to make people just little good workers and people who don't think for themselves, and they get their information from the, quote, official sources. That's what their real goal was.
The whole education system was basically, there's definitely, that's definitely... I'm trying to think of the model. I'm not the best person when it comes to talking about this issue
like
specifically.
Russian or something?
There's a certain model of education that Prussian model, I guess, which was definitely created or to basically create factory workers, to people who would be obedient, people who would show up on time. And that was, in some respect, that may have made sense for the time period in which it was implemented. But that's not what we want today. We actually need the exact opposite of that today in a lot of respects. It's the fact that we actually don't implement that model, sort of in a sense, to the degree that, and I'm not sure that the Chinese implement that model, but the point that I'm making is the Chinese kind of implement that very model, but like on overdrive. And as a result, the Chinese end up with much less creative individuals. And that's one of the things that has actually given a lot of our Western economies, how do I say this? It's given us prosperity, to a greater degree than China. So
I just think it should be it should be obvious. It should be, common sense that people should be able to read information on the internet, take what makes sense to them, leave what doesn't, make their own decisions. And because of that, people should be able to say whatever they want on the internet. And that leaves like things like the guy.
This kind of reminds me of the things I've been told by the left, and the left is basically of the belief that people are too stupid, and in some respect, to do that, and in some respect, I'm not so sure they're wrong, but I don't necessarily think
someone believes something that's wrong. It's like,
I don't think authoritarianism is somehow going to be the thing that somehow fixes the problem, right?
People believe all kinds of wrong things. Like, everybody believes completely wrong things about health, and it doesn't affect my life. It affects those people's lives, and they're just getting unhealthier and unhealthier. And all I'm trying to say is like regular day-to-day things about health that people believe, in my opinion, is wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, we end up having fear driven into us. Safety. This is unsafe. Well, yeah. I mean, at some point, all of this safety that you want to implement through violence actually ends up creating the opposite effect. We end up becoming less safe, but people, especially like politicians and things, they build their careers. That's how they get elected, is by passing the next law that's going to make us safer. And it actually ends up doing much more damage, by either directly in terms of now we're actually less safe, or in the sense that, well, we're now economically deprived of money that would have allowed us to be safer, but now we don't have that money. So now we're driving 25-year-old vehicles as opposed to, more recent vehicles, because you mandated, certain like regulations that increase the cost of new vehicles to such a degree that nobody can afford them.
It's Free Talk Live. There's more coming up, and you can call 603-283-6160. More coming up. There is a map that came out showing which states in the United States are making movements to attempt to leave the United States. Is secession coming in the United States? 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live. More coming up.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market. Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. It's physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com.
My name is Jacob Hornberger. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, which Congressman Ron Paul awarded for having an outstanding freedom website. Write us at fff@fff.org, and we'll send you a free 3-month subscription to our monthly journal of libertarian essays and our booklet, Economic Liberty in the Constitution, which George Mason University economics professor Walter Williams praised in a recent column. That's fff@fff.org.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next, after the news, here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm Sally Patterson. Donald Trump has chosen J.D. Vance as his running mate in America's 2024 presidential election. The former president made the announcement as Republicans gathered at the party's convention in the U.S. city of Milwaukee in Wisconsin. President Joe Biden's re-election campaign said Ohio Senator Vance will, quote, bend over backwards to enable Trump and his extreme MAGA agenda, even if it means breaking the law and no matter the harm to the American people. Caroline Malone reports.
Vance served in the U.S. Marine Corps, ran a successful business, and has even written a memoir, Hillbilly Elegy. The Trump campaign said he is a champion for the renewal of American manufacturing and has worked to defend and revive domestic automotive production. Vance has called for strong borders and for standing up to China. He's also a supporter of the traditional energy industry, oil and gas. Vance is a senator for Ohio, but does not have much other political experience. He's a young choice at just 39 years old. Caroline Malone, Washington.
At the convention, Trump also became the Republicans' official nominee. He's been the presumptive nominee for months, but has now secured the votes of enough delegates to lead the party into the general election. Meanwhile, a Florida judge has dismissed the criminal case against Trump on charges of mishandling top-secret documents. On Monday, Judge Aileen Cannon granted the defense motion to throw out the case because of how the special prosecutor was appointed. The ruling removes a major legal hurdle facing the former president ahead of November's election. Monday's events come just days after Trump survived an assassination attempt at a rally in the U.S. state of Pennsylvania. Investigations are underway into the possible motive behind the shooting, which killed one man attending the rally and critically injured 2 others. Benji Haya reports.
Whilst the politics plays out in Milwaukee, here in Washington, questions linger over how this shooting could have happened and why. The head of the Secret Service says her agency will comply fully with an independent review and congressional probes into Saturday's events, and that they're working to prevent an incident like this from ever taking place again. The Secret Service did kill the suspect, but only after he'd fired at Donald Trump. He also shot dead a bystander and injured others. Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas says the gunman should never have been allowed to get a direct line of sight to the former president, even from outside the rally's perimeter. The alleged assassin was 20-year-old Pennsylvania resident Thomas Matthew Crooks. His motive remains unknown. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden's urging this fractured nation to resolve its differences at the ballot box, not with bullets, as he seeks to unite the country and avoid the bloodshed causing a cycle of violent vengeance and retribution.
In other news, the United Nations says rebuilding and removing all the rubble in Gaza will cost between $500 and $600 million. This latest UN assessment comes as the war between Israel and Hamas continues to cause devastation across the Strip, while more than 100 Israeli hostages are still being held there after being kidnapped on October 7th. Jodie Jacobs reports from the United Nations in New York.
With the war still raging on, the United Nations says close to 140,000 buildings had been damaged in Gaza. Of these, it says just over a quarter were completely destroyed and about a tenth severely damaged. In May this year, the world body said that rebuilding homes in Gaza destroyed during the conflict could take until 2040. with the total cost of reconstruction across the territory costing as much as $40 billion. It says schools, health facilities, roads, sewers and other critical infrastructure have all suffered massive damage. On Monday, following days of conflict in the enclave, the UNRWA headquarters was hit, its building completely destroyed.
A survey published on Monday has revealed that almost 44% of Ukrainians think it's time to begin official peace negotiations with Russia. The figure is a significant increase from last year, although a majority of respondents are still opposed to ceding territory to Russia. Megumi Lim reports from Kyiv.
A survey published by ZN.UA, a Ukrainian media outlet, showed an increase in the number of Ukrainians in favor of negotiations compared to last May, where only 23% of respondents supported entering into talks with Russia. Results varied depending on the different regions of Ukraine, where the highest number of respondents in support of peace talks were from the south at 60%.
That's the latest feature story news. Sally Patterson reporting.
The American robin heralds the beginning of spring in temperate climates across North America. Its red breast makes it easily identifiable as the most disturbingly efficient murderer in the animal kingdom. Robins inculcate their young with these twisted maws. We see an adult robin feeding its young with the ripped-apart viscerae of an innocent worm. Like the Greek hero Atreus eating the flesh of his children at his own table, this black deed must surely curse the entire species. Even the most depraved acts of humanity pale in comparison to the robin's wickedness. Like idiot rapists, they commit their foul deeds with neither foresight nor hindsight. They live entirely in the present. Living beyond space and time, their god is the awful seething maelstrom of chaos at the center of the unfeeling universe.
This is the Onion News Network.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live, talk radio that you control, and 603-283-6160 is the phone number here at Free Talk Live. That's 603-283-6160. And I would like to thank Joseph Scholl, who is an amplifier with us here at Free Talk Live. That means that Joseph Scholl went to amps.freetalklive.com. That's amps.freetalklive.com to discover what kind of perks and benefits he could get for becoming a supporter of the show. AMP stands for Advertise, Market, Promote, and Support of Free Talk Live. And we'd like to thank all of our amplifiers, including Joseph Scholl, for being amplifiers with us. We really appreciate the support. With you in the studio tonight, you've got me, Bonnie.
And Mr. Penguin.
And I'm going to go right to your phone calls and your thoughts. We have an unscreened caller on Free Talk Live. Unscreened caller, you're on Free Talk Live. What's on your mind?
It's your boy, the evolutionary Free Talk Daddy.
So it's Skeeter.
Capitalist Little Skeet.
What's on your mind?
I wanted to talk about the effectiveness of accelerationism versus things like gradualism and repeal, or stupid hypocritical strategies like secession.
Well, Chris, do you know what accelerationism is?
We talked about it last Monday. I really am not interested in having this conversation again.
This is what I want to talk about. And for God's sakes, take off that stupid shirt, Mr. Penguin. You hypocrite.
He wants you to take your
Secession is
shirt
theft. I've already proven this.
Oh, you find me interesting or entertaining.
And I know last
How do you know
week,
you
Mr.
swung that
Penguin,
way?
You didn't just compare fighting traffic tickets with perpetuating the drug war. This is why libertarians are so delusional. They don't. Last week you tried to compare me trying to perpetuate the drug war in the efforts of accelerating government fiscal collapse with fighting traffic tickets. How stupid is that? Do you realize the magnitude and the cost of the drug war and wars to government? How wars, all these types of wars, are the demise of the state. It's not the health of the state. This is a true fallacy that libertarianism keeps perpetuating, and it needs to be smashed because you are setting back the true progress, and the true path to a market system. if this is what you really want. And guess what? There is no right to privacy in this market system. There is no right to travel in this market system. All the land is already owned by some collective. Your right to travel, these passports you ask for, are already bargained for between collectives and privileges granted to citizens. And if you don't want them, you can go out into the sea and be free, which you don't truly want, right? I've already shown this. You guys don't want freedom. You guys are hypocrites.
Is anybody else understanding like what he's saying right now?
He's just said all the same stuff that he always says, basically. So he's saying like that the U.S. government, a collective, owns all the land here, and it was bargained as to what privileges the citizens get to use on this land. So you're a hypocrite because you don't go live in the sea.
Yeah. Okay. That's like crazy talk.
I think so too.
Okay.
I don't really want to ask him if he has anything else on his mind because
just drop him then.
Just rambles about the same.
I mean,
stuff
he does this every week, I think, and it's not like if you want to hear him, you can go to freetalklive.com, click on archive, and listen to past shows. Yeah,
he calls every night. Yep.
Yeah,
not just Monday.
He's one of our habitual callers. So.
Yep, and the thing about that is we know that there's no such thing as a social contract theory. Well, I mean, not that there's no such thing as the theory, but that it's just a flawed theory that, oh, well, to live in a society, you already agreed to all this stuff like taxation because you didn't do anything about it because you live in the society. So you consent even if you say you don't, which just makes no sense because like as soon as you say, oh, well, now that I'm old enough and I've thought this through, I don't agree anymore. They also say you can't do that. So you implicitly consent to the social contract, but when you stop consenting, it doesn't matter. So you're a slave.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to add up to me at all either. But yeah, this is it needs to, it's funny. I definitely don't think I can give it justice, the argument, but at the same time it just doesn't make any sense to me. If you're talking about like a contract, like that's not how contracts work, right? Like you're supposed to get something from it, and then the other party's supposed to get something in exchange for it.
Before you agree to it, you should be able to say, okay, I don't like this and this, so I'm not agreeing to this part.
If you can't opt out of it, it's not a contract.
Right. You can't opt out of it.
Right. Like or not agree to it in the first place. That's not a contract. That's more like slavery, where you never got the choice in the first place.
Yep. And he's saying, well, you do have a choice. You can go live out in the sea, where there isn't already anything set up for people to live.
Like how do you? It doesn't. I don't even think that makes like. So wait. So I'm supposed to give up my property in order to die, basically? Like what gives you the right to have control over the property that I own, right? Like shouldn't it be on my property? I shouldn't have to comply with your laws.
I also just don't understand why people think that it's totally fine that there's something called a collective or a state that has every right of a human in making a contract. That doesn't make any sense. Like the people who first wrote the Constitution, they're dead now. Yeah. And the people that live now and claim to be part of the United States, they are not answerable to me. So how am I able to have a contract that is actually binding with this entity that is not answerable to me? You can't point to just one single person.
Yeah, this is kind of funny. I think this is kind of comes down to what we have is more of a gang or a mafia, and the question is size, right? Like, so the U.S. gang is the biggest gang in the world, right? But if you start looking at other countries that their central governments have failed, it's not that there's no government, it's that they're look at Somalia. I think is a kind of an example of this. It's not that there's no government, it's just those governments are warlords, and so there's a lot of little fiefdoms, right? But there's still government. So
I don't know much about Somalia itself.
I don't either, but it's basically a country that doesn't have a central government that has control over like the country. It has control over like maybe a handful of blocks or something like that. Like we're talking about like streets, like a handful of blocks, literally.
Wow.
They have control over. And then like if you want to go from one part of the city to another part of the city, you've got to deal with other little gangs basically. Wow. Yeah, I mean little governments. It's not that people don't live there. There are people that live there. It's and in some respect it's probably not that different than living within the United States, in that you also have to deal with if we drive through, for example, we're in New Hampshire right now. If we want to go to New Jersey, we're going to drive through Massachusetts, right? So, we have to deal with Massachusetts gang. I mean, that's what the government of Massachusetts, that's a gang. It's just another gang. If we drive through with a gun, they're going to, potentially arrest us for, because Massachusetts is like anti-gun. So they have laws that are against guns.
I drive to Massachusetts like 2 times a week, and I was just saying that at least the part I drive through, like from here to another part of Western Massachusetts, there I don't normally see a whole lot of cops, but today I did, and the car coming towards me before I saw it warned me, blinking his lights, and so I paid it forward and warned everyone else coming. That was nice. I see that a lot in New Hampshire, but they do in Massachusetts also. Yeah,
the funny thing about New Hampshire too is that like cops here are not incentivized to ticket people.
They just do it in Ware for some reason.
Yeah, it's not to say there's not like cities that are like super, they will definitely ticket you, but it's definitely not to the degree. Like I don't think I've never gotten a speeding ticket in New Hampshire in the 8 years I've been here.
The only place I've ever gotten a speeding ticket, the only place I've ever been pulled over was Utah.
I got pulled over for speeding in New Hampshire, in Keene actually, but I didn't get a ticket. Nice. And that's actually very common in New Hampshire. Well, they'll pull you over, but they won't actually give you a ticket. And the reason they don't give you a ticket is because they're not incentivized to. If I don't even know what a ticket would run for a speeding ticket. I know other types of tickets are like $60, like, or $5. Like these tickets in New Hampshire are really, really minimal by comparison to like Massachusetts. Like you get pulled over in Massachusetts, I won't be surprised if it's a $300 ticket or even more than that. Maybe it's $600 ticket now. But New Hampshire, not so much. I think they just recently, actually, in the last handful of years, increased parking tickets from $5 to like $10. And that just, I mean, I couldn't believe that the parking tickets were $5 when I moved in 2016.
What, that was a lot? Or that was a little?
No, that was like
cheap.
Nothing. Like, why do you even bother giving a parking ticket out if it's only $5? Like,
yeah, because if someone challenges that, it instantly is cost the city more than $5 to prosecute.
Way
you.
More than $5 because then they have to bring the parking ticket lady in, and she's not getting paid $5 an hour.
Yeah,
so
I asked her. She gets paid her normal $25 an hour.
Okay, so they're probably at minimum throwing away $25 for her because she's getting paid for that sitting in that courtroom. Mm-hmm. You're also gonna have to pay the judge. You're gonna have to pay prosecutors and bailiffs and for that time for that trial, and it's way more than the $5 that they're gonna get, assuming they win.
Mm-hmm.
So
it is crazy that more people don't challenge it, but there is someone in Keene. I'll tell you after the break, who is doing challenging a ticket at the end of the month. I'm gonna go there.
Not a parking ticket, is it?
I know it's a traffic thing, but I don't think it's parking.
Okay, I was gonna say if that's the case, that'll be interesting because I don't think we've had amongst our libertarian group here in New Hampshire, and we probably have maybe 100 people or so in the area. I don't think we've had a parking ticket since you got a ticket, actually, parking ticket, and you fought it.
I fought it in July.
That was really unusual because they basically have stopped. I don't want to say they've stopped issuing parking tickets to Free Staters, but they've basically stopped giving us court dates. So they just throw the ticket away, basically.
Yeah, they did that to Ian before they ended up giving me one.
Yeah, and the only reason I can think of that they basically that you got they didn't throw the ticket out was because you and Ian went to fight to request the court date together. And I think if it hadn't been that way, I don't think they would have given you a court date. I think if it had been any other libertarian, they just would have dropped it. Because we had I want to say...
But they dropped Ian's own. Ian went to go contest his own parking ticket all by himself.
When was this?
Like months before mine.
Interesting. Well,
it's all weird.
In any
the
event,
government never knows what
they want to do. There's probably been at least a dozen tickets over 3 or 4 years, and every single one of them they dropped.
Wow.
Of Free Staters. So the last ticket that was issued or the last trial that we had was my trial, and I won on both of the tickets. And ever since then, which you don't even remember because you weren't even here. There hasn't been any other parking tickets where if somebody had gone and requested a trial that they didn't just throw the ticket out.
Well, there was mine, but that was like last year.
Well, that's what I mean. That's yours. Yours is the only exception. That you're the only person
since then.
Since
you.
My 2 tickets. And we used to have parking ticket trials all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that they no more parking ticket trials is I think it's saying something to there being the effectiveness of the activism here. And it's a small thing. Don't get me wrong. It's a really small thing. But one of the things it does is it shows that enough people coming together in one in this case state can have an impact politically. It's a weird one. And backing up a moment, this doesn't seem like a whole lot because, tomorrow they could change it, right? They could start giving us tickets and giving us trials again, right? They could. But some of the things that we've done in the past, we've won, sort of at the local level, like weed, for example. We were smoking weed in Central Square and, we had about 100 people. Like, this is the best story I've ever been told. I wasn't here at the time, but 100 people smoking weed. Well, no, 100 people in Central Square protesting against the drug laws. This is a decade ago in Keene. And what happened there was the one person, two cops come by and sit down next to, I want to say it was nobody or Rich Paul, but I think it may have been actually like somebody else.
Derek J.
May have been Derek J.
I don't know.
Anyway, but he gets out. He gets out. Well, no, he asks the cops, "Do you mind if I smoke?" To the cop.
Yeah, it was Derek J. then.
Yeah. And the cop says, "Yeah, go for it. No problem." And so he pulls out his weed cigarette and the cop immediately arrests him for it. They take Derek down to the police station. Well, 100 people go down to the police station and they go inside the police station, and there's like a
lobby.
Yeah, there's a lobby. I mean, there's enough for maybe 25 people in there, but we got 25 people inside, 75 people in the hallways, and like all the way out leading outside, and everybody starts smoking weed in the police station. They never again arrested anybody for weed. And there were many reports of people smoking weed in Central Square, but nobody was ever arrested after that. Awesome. And the point that I'm making here is that
it shows how useless they are when they can't even stop people from.
Well, what it does is we had a win, and yes, it wasn't in the law.
Yep.
But it was a precursor to what eventually occurred, which was decriminalization.
Mm-hmm.
So
probably changes the cops' own attitudes too when they see like, we've been doing this for 20 years and people not only are just like continuing to smoke weed in general, but they're doing it so fragrant, whatever. They're in our face.
Yeah.
In our faces, doing it in our lobby. We can't stop this.
Yeah.
It's gotta be, demoralizing for them, which is good.
I think there's another aspect of this too, right? So by demonstrating liberty and not going along to get along effectively, I think it sends a message that at least even if we haven't changed the law in one area or another, it sends a message of don't mess with us, because if you mess with Free Staters, well, it's gonna be a pain for you, but we're eventually going to get the law changed, right? But if they don't mess with us, right? Now the law, we may try to get the law changed eventually anyway. But the point is that if they don't fight us, they're going to be able to have their power longer. Is sort of is conceptually, right? Because that means we're not fighting something, because if they're not enforcing something against us, then we have no reason to fight it, right? Like that's kind of the logic. So if it in some sense it may be worse for, you know, the rest of New Hampshire, the rest of the people in New Hampshire, but at least for free staters, we're freer even before the laws have changed.
One thing I know is I never get pulled over, and I have all this free state sticker, porcupines and stuff like that on my car, and I have a Montana plate.
Yeah, they I think
I've never been pulled over here at all.
And part of the reason for this is because of how much there's certain words I shouldn't use on the radio here, but how much garbage that we've given them over the years. There's something called cop blocking, and it hasn't really been there used to be more of it, but it's actually still happening, where people actually go around and they sort of chase cops. And you know, I've done this.
Go watch them and film them.
Yeah, and it's not, and you know, chasing cops, like how do you chase cops? Like it sounds like really crazy, but it's, first of all, it's illegal. Second of all, it's really what it is it's police accountability. So it's making sure that the police are doing their job and doing it properly. And if they're not doing their job, well, they're getting filmed, then we're going to call them out. And it's really boring, actually. It's really kind of boring work. But this is also one of those reasons why, you know, people who have Montana plates in New Hampshire don't get pulled over as often.
Yeah, I really think that is true. Some people say that they don't think it's true. I drive a lot now.
And by the way, something that people have to understand is people in New Hampshire, libertarians in New Hampshire, get Montana plates because, it's sort of in relation to freedom. It is in relation to freedom, but it's so Montana has you could register in, at least if you take your car out of the state like every 90 days or something like that, you basically don't have to register in New Hampshire. You can register in Montana under a trust or maybe an LLC, and you can plate that car in New Hampshire, and you can get insurance in New Hampshire. But again, it's only once your car has been here more than like a certain number of days that it has to be registered in New Hampshire.
And it's also permanent, so you don't have to keep applying over and over again, and that saves you from having to give the state, either state, more and more money. Like if you have your thing licensed in New Hampshire, then you have to do I think it's yearly
inspections is what they call them. Yeah.
And you have to pay the government for, you know, the sticker that says you got that done.
It's $40 for an inspection. There's also like a tax basically, that you also have to pay. So.
And they call it a fee.
Yeah, they call it a fee. But what's the difference between a fee and a tax? You're paying money.
Right.
And it's a percentage of like the value of the vehicle based on like the Blue Book value or something like that.
I really think that it's something that should be changed in New Hampshire with like the free staters in the House, because it's basically a hidden tax. Like people like to say, oh, New Hampshire has the lowest taxes, but if you have an expensive car.
Okay, so here's the thing. So the fee itself doesn't go to the state. So it's what it is it goes to the inspection, the whatever the car repair place is, or whatever, the private entity that does that inspection.
That just sounds
they're the ones who get the money.
Crappy. That's so
it's
bad incentives.
It's very much it's very much crony capitalism, I think might be the word. It's definitely not free market capitalism. It's more like crony capitalism. Unfortunately. And we don't have, there's a lobby, for like mechanics, and that lobby, we're basically, to get anything passed in that regard, we have to stand up to that lobby. And, unfortunately, there's a lot of mechanics in New Hampshire. There's probably way more mechanics than there are, free staters. So that's something that's going to be very challenging to overcome. Most of the thing that people have to understand is libertarians only make up a very small percentage of the population of New Hampshire. Now, we definitely have more power than anywhere else, but we don't control the state yet.
More people need to move here who believe in the principles of non-aggression and who don't believe that there should be government people ruling their lives. 603-283-6160. More coming up. We're going to talk about states with movements to leave the United States. More coming up. It's Free Talk Live. Don't go anywhere.
If you're looking for work, it's a process of elimination, and you're trying not to be eliminated. So here's a tip for making the cut, and this might seem subtle, but to the person interviewing you, it's not. There is a world of difference between applicants who convey, "I need a job," and those who simply ooze, "I want to work," especially in these lean times when many you're competing with will seem desperate in "I'll take anything" mode. If you convey specific interest in this job at this company, you will be conspicuous. Thus, the value of going to school on the company you're applying to before the interview. With money and attention so tight now, effective communication skills have never been more important. For more tips for job seekers and everyone else, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm Sally Patterson. Donald Trump has chosen J.D. Vance as his running mate in America's 2024 presidential election. The former president made the announcement as Republicans gathered at the party's convention in the U.S. city of Milwaukee in Wisconsin. President Joe Biden's re-election campaign said Ohio Senator Vance will, quote, bend over backwards to enable Trump and his extreme MAGA agenda, even if it means breaking the law and no matter the harm to the American people. Caroline Malone reports.
Vance served in the US Marine Corps, ran a successful business, and has even written a memoir. The Trump campaign said he's a champion for the renewal of American manufacturing and has worked to defend and revive domestic automotive production. Vance has called for strong borders and for standing up to China. He's also a supporter of the traditional energy industry, oil and gas. Vance is a senator for Ohio, but does not have much other political experience. He's a young choice at just 39 years old.
At the convention, Trump also became the Republicans' official nominee. He's been the presumptive nominee for months, but has now secured the votes of enough delegates to lead the party into the general election. Meanwhile, a Florida judge has dismissed the criminal case against Trump on charges of mishandling top-secret documents. On Monday, Judge Aileen Cannon granted the defense motion to throw out the case because of how the special prosecutor was appointed. The ruling removes a major legal hurdle facing the former president ahead of November's election. Monday's events come just days after Trump survived an assassination attempt at a rally in the U.S. state of Pennsylvania. Investigations are underway into the possible motive behind the shooting, which killed one man attending the rally and critically injured two others. Benji Haya reports.
Whilst the politics plays out in Milwaukee, here in Washington, questions linger over how this shooting could have happened and why. The head of the Secret Service says her agency will comply fully with an independent review and congressional probes into Saturday's events, and that they're working to prevent an incident like this from ever taking place again. The Secret Service did kill the suspect, but only after he'd fired at Donald Trump. He also shot dead a bystander and injured others. Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas says the gunman should never have been allowed to get a direct line of sight to the former president, even from outside the rally's perimeter. The alleged assassin was 20-year-old Pennsylvania resident Thomas Matthew Crooks. His motive remains unknown. President Joe Biden's urging this fractured nation to resolve its differences at the ballot box, not with bullets, as he seeks to unite the country and avoid the bloodshed causing a cycle of violent vengeance and retribution.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com.
Talk radio that you control. 603-283-6160 is the phone number here. That's 603-283-6160. And Free Talk Live is brought to you by LibertyMinded.com. Official Free Talk Live gear like t-shirts and hoodies are available at LibertyMinded.com. Plus, you'll find unique collections of cool and funny liberty-oriented clothing at libertyminded.com. That's libertyminded.com. With you on the show tonight, you've got me, Bonnie.
And Mr. Penguin.
And in the last segment, we were talking about states that within their state, they have a movement to leave the United States. See, that seemed like a contradiction or maybe just a tongue twister to Mr. Penguin. And during the break, he said that. But I do want to get in the habit of not referring to the United States as if it's just a country called the United States. But unfortunately, Daniel Webster made a movement to have the people to start thinking of things that way back in like the 1860s or 50s, maybe the 50s.
I mean, I think what you're saying is it's a federation, right?
Yeah, it's just a group of states that have an agreement with each other. No different than Europe with the United Union or European Union.
It's become something other than that.
Right, because people want to believe that it's a perpetual union, can never be broken apart, and the states don't have any right to leave.
I mean, so the idea of the United States, right, was that it would be there would be governance at a higher level, so that the states wouldn't go to war with each other, right? So you could sort of think of it like a court. That was the idea for the United States.
A really weak head.
Yeah.
A group of courts or justices, the justice branch. I mean the judicial branch, and then also people who make laws that were supposed to be very, very regulated.
How well do you remember your history?
The thing is, I didn't learn much history in public school at all. I learned it all afterwards.
Do you remember? Because so when the United States, the colonies broke away from the British Empire,
mm-hmm.
there was a government formed.
The Articles of Confederation? I
believe so. And then 8 years later, that was I don't know if it was dissolved. I don't know if that's quite the right. Yeah, I guess that's kind of I think that's kind of the way to put it. It was basically dissolved and another government was formed. And that's what we have today.
Yeah, and the states had to ratify the Constitution, and several of those states specifically put in, I know Rhode Island was one, I don't remember the rest of them. New Hampshire, unfortunately, was not one, but it doesn't really matter. That they put in their ratifying document, we reserve the right to leave if we want to leave. And still, Abraham Lincoln just told people, yep, you're not allowed to leave, and killed. The experts now believe 800,000 people. They used to think 600,000 people died in the Civil War. Now historians believe it's more like 800,000 people died in the Civil War.
Wow, that's a lot of people.
Especially for that time. There was not 300 million Americans.
The country currently is something like 320 million people.
Yep.
So for it to be almost 1 million people, for hundreds of years ago, that's got to be a percentage. That's got to be a decent percentage. I don't know what the population was at that time, but I do know it was way, way less than it is now.
Yep. And I just think that Abraham Lincoln made a bunch of stuff up in order to keep the states together. His friend Daniel Webster changed the dictionary definition of things to convince Americans that, oh, we live in just one big country called the United States. And before then, they didn't think of it like that.
No.
And the reason we bring this up is because there's this Newsweek article from Newsweek.com titled Map Shows States with Movements to Leave United States. It's a really confusing title. It's not a good title. I don't like it because it confused Penguin both times I read it. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Basically, this article is going to talk about multiple different states that have movements currently going on inside of them. Groups of people who believe that their state should leave the federal union called the United States. New Hampshire joined an increasingly lengthy list of states that have launched their own secessionist movements this week. The New Hampshire Independence Movement, or NHXIT, said it rejects the overreach of the federal government and is committed to making New Hampshire a free, independent, and prosperous nation in an announcement this week. There are 2.5 million unelected bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., and they are responsible for dragging the nation to the brink of bankruptcy.
Wow, that's more people than are in all of New Hampshire.
Yeah, there are more unelected bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. than the population of New Hampshire, which is about 1.5 million?
1.3, 1.4 at most.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they said that those people are responsible for dragging the nation to the brink of bankruptcy. Not only that, but they are siphoning money out of taxpayers' wallets every year, trampling on the rights of New Hampshire citizens. Carla Garrick, the organization's leader, said in a statement, "We must take back our government and work to guarantee the protection of the rights and basic necessities of New Hampshire residents." That's also Carla Garrick. Several other states have also launched their own independence movements. While Texas's Texit political push might be the most well-known, California, Alaska, Louisiana, which was new to me, and Florida have similar movements pushing for secession from the United States. And then it shows their little map. Just shows a map of the United States with only California, Alaska, Texas, Louisiana, Florida, and New Hampshire highlighted. Garrick, that's Carla Garrick, the New Hampshire movement's leader, was born in South Africa before immigrating to the United States, becoming a lawyer, and joining the Free State Project, a group in New Hampshire working against big government and for personal and economic freedom. Garrick previously told Newsweek that secession is an idea whose time has come and a reflection of the frustration everyone on the political spectrum is feeling. Across the country, states have unique reasons for wanting out of the Union, but a dislike of big government is key in many movements. I really don't like the term big government, even though I know it appeals to right-wingers, because it's any government.
Yeah, I think it's probably be worth speaking about some of the things, like some of the problems that people have or concerns that people have about like independence. Like, for example, people, one of the things I think that people are afraid of is losing their Social Security. And what they don't understand is that you don't have to live in the United States to get your Social Security as long as you've paid into that system. So you're not losing it. Like if you live in New Hampshire and New Hampshire became independent, you're not going to lose that. And we have there's been other parts of there's parts of Mexico where people were given the choice of basically what happens in that case is that the border is defined by the river, and the river changes course. And there was a town that basically ended up becoming part of Mexico. Now, if you stayed in Mexico,
is this the Rio Grande? Like the one that
is that the border?
The border in Texas
Maybe.
in
yeah,
Mexico?
I think so, yeah. But when that border changed, okay, and that part of the United States became part of Mexico, the people who stayed in that town that were they still remained U.S. citizens, and they still got their Social Security because they were born in the United States. That's what makes you a U.S. citizen generally, okay? For most of us. And the reason they kept getting their Social Security is because they paid into Social Security while they were in the United States, right? And the same thing applies to somebody if they move to Mexico. Maybe they retire and they move to Mexico, or they move to some other country. They're still going to get, because they paid into U.S. Social Security, they're still going to get that Social Security no matter where they live. And there's a lot of other things that people are afraid of. Okay. Another thing I think people are afraid of is that, well, I don't want to have to, I have to go into Boston every day for work. Let's say maybe you live in Nashua, right? Or Manchester. Well, nothing says that there has to be a border between countries as far like a regulated border like there is currently between Canada and the United States. There's many countries that do not have a border between them. Or there's a border, but maybe I'm trying to think some places like in Europe. Europe is a good example. So Europe is a set of countries, but they don't have border guards at the border between, Spain and France. There's no border. There's no customs to go through, right?
Spain and France, there's like a big giant mountain range.
Yeah, but there's like tunnels and ways to get one way or another. The point is that there's you don't have to stop and deal with customs every time you cross the border.
Okay.
And there's nothing that says that just because New Hampshire became independent or some other part of the United States became an independent country, that you would have to set up a border of that nature. That's currently how it is between the United States and Canada, which seems very silly to me. And I've always thought like we should be working to remove that border, not increase the security between the United States and Canada. I kind of understand the border between the United States and Mexico because there are, reasons that you can at least argue. I'm not in favor of that border. I'm just saying that there are at least reasons that you can argue to have that border. Whereas with Canada and the United States, there's less of a reason, right? Like the populations are much more similar in terms of, backgrounds and religions and just all sorts of stuff, right? So you don't have the threats coming from the Canadian border that you might have from the southern border between the United States and Mexico. So yeah, I mean, so there's nothing that says if New Hampshire became an independent state that there would be any reason to set up a border, some sort of border fence or anything of that nature. And there's already good relations between Canada and the United States, and people already cross that border all the time, relatively freely. And it used to be more so, but
the idea that even if there was like border security set up, that there couldn't be some kind of like identifying thing where you put something on your car and you don't have to stop every time you go in between Massachusetts and like if you work in Boston and you live in Nashua.
Well, and the thing is,
people don't have imagination.
Nothing says that the United States couldn't stop you, right? So you could, for example, maybe have some sort of border patrol pulling people over to do inspections, but maybe you're only inspecting 5% of the cars that travel through, right? Or 2%. And I think what's kind of humorous is that the United States actually, the number of packages inspected coming into the United States is like less than 1%, I think, something like that. It's a very small number of packages that actually get inspected by customs. Why are we more concerned about inspecting people than we are concerned about inspecting packages, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like why is that? Why do we have more freedom in terms of packages than we have in terms of people? You would think it would be the other way around. Like you'd be more concerned, right? You'd be more concerned about like packages coming into the United States than you would be about people.
Well, I have this theory that like they're so lazy checking people going into the prison whenever I go visit Ian.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, I really think that they want people bringing stuff in because it helps their little economy. Like the guards probably pay off somebody to get this and let them sell that, and I think they just pretend to be searching you.
I don't know if it's because they want an economy. I think it's my suspicion is that it's more about being lazy. People don't want to work, right? Like, I mean, that's just kind of like, who wants to work, right?
Ridiculous
and
amount,
the question is, who is enforcing it, right? If there's nobody enforcing it, are they gonna bother? I suspect they're probably not gonna bother to be,
they
to
don't
work
care
harder.
as much as you would think.
Yeah.
They care more about, sorry, you can't wear shorts in here, you're gonna turn on all the inmates, than they care about, hey, am I allowed to bring this bag of quarters in? They don't even look at it. They're like, yeah, it's fine. Just let me finish scanning you. It's so weird. But that's at the prison he's in now. The last one was kind of more intense than that, but.
So you probably need to clarify. So he was so Ian Freeman was in medium security or low security.
No, it was low.
And now he's in what's called a camp.
Yep, lower than low security.
Yeah.
So low
so
security.
He could literally walk out.
Yeah.
Of the camp, but he couldn't. He couldn't have just walked out of the low security prison.
Right. The low security prison was like a big building with like each room you're in has a locked door.
Now, if they catch him walking out of the camp, there's consequences for that.
Yeah. Huge.
But they're gonna move him to low security
or high. I don't know at that point.
Or high or medium security. Yeah. Something that's not the camp.
Apparently today, everything got shut down. They got locked in their rooms or whatever because somebody got stabbed in the low security that Ian was just in last month.
So wait, they locked up the camp because somebody got stabbed in low security?
Next door. Yep.
Why?
That's what I was saying. I was like, what does that have to do with anything? But they just act like that for everything. They put a stop to visits the day after Trump got attempted to get assassinated just because they're paranoid losers.
I think it's more of an excuse to like punish people.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I mean, because think of the type of people who work these jobs, right? Like they crave power. They crave
controlling people.
That's the types of people who, get into leadership positions, and it doesn't matter whether it's a school or a prison or a politician looking to gain power from getting elected to some office or other. These people are effectively power tripping on control of other people, and it's arbitrary. It's often arbitrary.
Seems completely arbitrary that, we're just not going to have visitors Saturday or Sunday because somebody tried to assassinate Trump in Pennsylvania on Saturday, but we'll have visitors Monday. It's like, makes no sense.
No.
What are they stopping? Like nothing. It's ridiculous. Nothing changed in between Saturday and Sunday, or Sunday and Monday. I just really hate all these stupid rules and controlling of other people's lives. I think a lot of it is just about like, you don't know what's going to happen next.
Yep.
Like you have no sense of security or normalcy in your life.
There may be, and I'm not sure that this is actually the case, but there may be a point to it in obedience, compliance, getting people to become compliant, especially with a prison population, because when they're released, you want them to not go back and do things that they're not supposed to be doing, and
just get them used to being compliant.
Yeah,
and
right. Exactly. Yep.
Institutionalized.
Yeah, institutionalized. That's exactly what they're aiming for. Is compliance.
So, back to this Newsweek article. It says Daniel Miller, president of the pro-independence Texas nationalist movement, previously told Newsweek he supports all other states in their right to secede from the country. He said 100%, but it's not that I support their seceding, it's that I support their right to have the discussion and to have the vote, and if that's what they want to do as a people, then they should do so. Miller said, some state movements have more support than others. In Alaska, 36% of residents expressed their support for the state becoming a fully independent nation in a recent YouGov poll. Wow, that's pretty good. 36% of Alaskans?
Yeah, and it's interesting because it doesn't necessarily take that much to change things in some respect. It's right now you may only have, it might sound like, oh well, that's not anywhere near enough to change things. No, but you depending on what happens down the road, you don't necessarily need and it depends, but in some situations you only need 51%, for example, to change things. And that's not that far off.
That's just people who are all in, like their support for the state becoming a fully independent nation is 36%, but there might be like 50% that are okay with a vote.
In the case of the British exit from the European Union, it was 51% is what was needed. So
occasionally, lawmakers have promoted the possibility of a coming secession due to escalating tensions between Republicans and Democrats. Last year, House Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene said there could be a national divorce between Republican and Democrat states. This could see powers taken away from the federal government and set at the state level. Across the United States, 23% of Americans support their state leaving the Union, with 51% saying they're opposed.
There's another thought, and I don't necessarily know that one is necessarily would be more successful than the other, but it's not. The problem, the reason that I think people want to leave the United States is because of the draconian behavior of the federal government. Mm-hmm. We could return to states having greater power and rights without necessarily leaving what would have been the Union effectively, what the original vision of the United States. Because really at the end of the day, all the federal government is supposed to be doing is basically controlling trade between states, not, deciding, what states can and can't do really. Like for example, weed, like the way the courts have ruled is they basically can regulate weed because it affects interstate commerce.
they could say anything affects interstate commerce because
Right,
there's
and
that one little clause.
right, and this is one of the ways they actually have achieved the United States as a single government, as opposed to
and the huge amount of power it
union.
has that the Constitution really doesn't give them.
Right. They've expanded the power, the federal government, that they have over the states. And so if we actually interpret, I don't want to say reinterpret, I guess we would sort of be reinterpreting, the United States to what it was originally intended, which is a union of states, and the federal government only acted as an arbitrator of trade between states. Then all of a sudden, we wouldn't need to leave the United States, right?
Yep, I just think that would be as simple as someone somehow getting a court case that challenges, the way that they use that clause, the interstate commerce clause, I think is what it's called.
Yeah.
And then the right justices in the Supreme Court making the right decision on it, which seems very, very difficult.
It does.
A lot easier said than done.
I will give credit to the right wing justices that have changed some of the laws. I don't think the decisions, unfortunately, haven't all gone in the right direction. And I think the sales tax is an example of them going in the opposite direction. So it's sort of like
they're unpredictable.
It's right, and that's part of the problem currently is we don't have, and that's one of the problems with the federal government and the Democrats and Republicans. There's no underlying principle. Like, at least with libertarians, there's an underlying principle. So you can be like, okay, well, that's clearly wrong, or that's not libertarian. Whereas with the Republicans or Democrats, you can't really do that. And so we end up having, you have these decisions by Republicans, Republican justices that are like, okay, well, that's a good decision, but that's not a consistent decision with this other thing that you decided on. So yeah, you gave states some rights back, but you actually expanded
government powers.
Yeah, sort of. Right. Or you've taken away states' rights, I guess, in some respect, because they ruled with the sales tax decision, and I can't remember the name of the decision, but basically that businesses, no matter where they're operating from within the United States, have to collect sales taxes on behalf of other state governments.
Yep,
which is absolutely insane, because if you operate your business outside of the United States, you don't have to collect sales tax for any of those states. So you're actually giving literally other businesses in other countries an advantage over businesses within the United States.
That doesn't seem very wise.
No, it doesn't. I mean, why would you? And I'm still, it's almost kind of surprising that we haven't seen. Well, no, I guess we have seen more competition from outside the United States. If you've ever ordered something from China, not only is it going to be cheaper, but you also won't have to pay tax on it. If you order the same good from within the United States, you're going to have to pay more for it, and you're going to have to pay a tax on it, unless you're in New Hampshire or one or two other states that don't have sales tax.
Yeah, I don't know which other ones don't, because I know that Texas has sales tax, because when I first came here and I bought a jacket, it was the price that it was listed on the tag, and I was like, did you forget to
might be
charge
Washington?
me the
Might be Washington. Or no, it might be Oregon. Something like that.
It was a good surprise, but 603-283-6160. More about these secessionist movements coming up. It's Free Talk Live, 603-283-6160.
Free Talk Live.
They gently kind of hang on to it or manipulate it with their mouths. The pufferfish then releases toxins that seem to intoxicate the dolphins.
He's getting high. Apparently, there's legislation in India to consider dolphins to be non-human persons. Would dolphins be subject to arrest for getting intoxicated?
How else could they deal with this threat to the dolphins?
Obviously, there's disorderly conduct and public intoxication.
I bet they'll resist arrest too.
Yeah, because dolphins don't really have hands, and they're going to fight you, and a dolphin will rape you.
Think of the money for the prison industrial complex here. I mean, they'll have to build whole new underwater prisons for the dolphins. This could be big.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern at freetalklive.com.
There are basically two types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm Sally Patterson. Donald Trump has chosen J.D. Vance as his running mate in America's 2024 presidential election. The former president made the announcement as Republicans gathered at the party's convention in the U.S. city of Milwaukee in Wisconsin. President Joe Biden's re-election campaign said Ohio Senator Vance will, quote, bend over backwards to enable Trump and his extreme MAGA agenda, even if it means breaking the law and no matter the harm to the American people. Caroline Malone reports.
Vance served in the US Marine Corps, ran a successful business, and has even written a memoir, Hillbilly Elegy. The Trump campaign said he is a champion for the renewal of American manufacturing and has worked to defend and revive domestic automotive production. Vance has called for strong borders and for standing up to China. He's also a supporter of the traditional energy industry, oil and gas. Vance is a senator for Ohio, but does not have much other political experience. He's a young choice at just 39 years old. Caroline Malone, Washington.
At the convention, Trump also became the Republicans' official nominee. He's been the presumptive nominee for months, but has now secured the votes of enough delegates to lead the party into the general election. Meanwhile, a Florida judge has dismissed the criminal case against Trump on charges of mishandling top-secret documents. On Monday, Judge Aileen Cannon granted the defense motion to throw out the case because of how the special prosecutor was appointed. The ruling removes a major legal hurdle facing the former president ahead of November's election. Monday's events come just days after Trump survived an assassination attempt at a rally in the U.S. state of Pennsylvania. Investigations are underway into the possible motive behind the shooting, which killed one man attending the rally and critically injured 2 others. Benji Haya reports.
Whilst the politics plays out in Milwaukee, here in Washington, questions linger over how this shooting could have happened and why. The head of the Secret Service says her agency will comply fully with an independent review and congressional probes into Saturday's events, and that they're working to prevent an incident like this from ever taking place again. The Secret Service did kill the suspect, but only after he'd fired at Donald Trump. He also shot dead a bystander and injured others. Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas says the gunman should never have been allowed to get a direct line of sight to the former president, even from outside the rally's perimeter. The alleged assassin was 20-year-old Pennsylvania resident Thomas Matthew Crooks. His motive remains unknown. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden's urging this fractured nation to resolve its differences at the ballot box, not with bullets, as he seeks to unite the country and avoid the bloodshed causing a cycle of violent vengeance and retribution.
In other news, the United Nations says rebuilding and removing all the rubble in Gaza will cost between $500 and $600 million. This latest UN assessment comes as the war between Israel and Hamas continues to cause devastation across the Strip, while more than 100 Israeli hostages are still being held there after being kidnapped on October 7th. Jody Jacobs reports from the United Nations in New York.
With the war still raging on, the United Nations says close to 140,000 buildings had been damaged in Gaza. Of these, it says just over a quarter were completely destroyed and about a tenth severely damaged. In May this year, the world body said that rebuilding homes in Gaza destroyed during the conflict could take until 2040. with the total cost of reconstruction across the territory costing as much as $40 billion. It says schools, health facilities, roads, sewers, and other critical infrastructure have all suffered massive damage. On Monday, following days of conflict in the enclave, the UNRWA headquarters was hit, its building completely destroyed.
A survey published on Monday has revealed that almost 44% of Ukrainians think it's time to begin official peace negotiations with Russia. The figure is a significant increase from last year, although a majority of respondents are still opposed to ceding territory to Russia. Megumi Lim reports from Kyiv.
A survey published by ZN.UA, a Ukrainian media outlet, showed an increase in the number of Ukrainians in favor of negotiations compared to last May, where only 23% of respondents supported entering into talks with Russia. Results varied depending on the different regions of Ukraine, where the highest number of respondents in support of peace talks were from the south at 60%.
That's the latest Feature Story News. Sally Patterson reporting.
Tomorrow's my big day. I'm going to go in for surgery, and hopefully you'll come along. Now, I do have to admit that I am in a bit of pain, so I'm really looking forward to this procedure. I think we're both going to find out that having surgery just isn't as scary as it sounds.
We're covering our own Jim Haggerty's kidney stone removal surgery, and his surgery is now just minutes away. So, Dr. Atka, tell us what precautions we would take to prevent us from getting kidney stones.
Always stay hydrated. Water helps the kidneys break the stuff down.
Hear that, Jim? More water.
What?
More water. Maybe we should replace your coffee.
Please go away. Please. Ow, no.
That's a camera they're going to use to film the whole surgery from inside Jim's
yes,
body,
that's going to
right?
be pushed into Jim's urethra as well. Now, normally they wouldn't do this. This is purely for the benefit of us watching it on TV.
All right, stick with us because first he's going to pop into the children's ward to cheer up some youngsters suffering from terminal illnesses.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live, talk radio that you control, and 603-283-6160 is the phone number here. That's 603-283-6160. With you in the studio tonight, you've got me, Bonnie.
And Mr. Penguin.
And I'm going to go straight to your phone calls and your thoughts. We have Paul. And Paul, you're calling about the presidency. What was on your mind about that? Paul going once. You there, Paul? Oh,
hello.
My bad. It was muted, and I didn't realize that I had muted it earlier. I hear you now, Paul. Sorry about that.
Okay.
What did you have
me
to?
Muted. Okay. Well,
yes, I did. I'm so
okay.
sorry.
No worries. Bonnie, I want to give you props for having to suffer through having your husband being a political prisoner. I just want to get that right on the record.
Thank you.
All of this thing about the presidency, people were so concerned about the presidential election because they think the president of the government, the so-called president, has something to do with them. But actually, we've all been fooled into thinking that the president is just the president of the government, not the president of us. It's like the president of Standard Oil, Well, great, they're a president of a company, right? But Standard Oil doesn't have any jurisdiction over us. Okay, the United States government has no jurisdiction over us either. Okay, it's just that everybody thinks they do. But if you look into it, the closer you look into this, the closer you realize that the founders of this country made us all sovereign. Okay, the idea that, well, we got rid of the king. Okay, and the government just represents the king. But in our country, in our form of government, the way the founders originally envisioned it, the government is a servant that is just an administrative It's like the people got together and hired a bunch of folks to, well, you take care of this stuff for us, the post office and the army and stuff. But we're still the boss. You guys are just supposed to take care of all that stuff for us. And you've got an administrative organization that has officers, but those officers only have authority over the people who work for the government. They don't have authority for the bosses who hired them in the first place.
Why do you think that so many people just take it for granted that the president of the United States has power over us, and the fact that the United States does put so many people in prison and seems to affect a lot of people's lives? Why do you think that is?
Well, it's because everybody has been educated from birth to believe that. And so everybody just goes along with it. And of course, then you've got ignorant people, who when, somebody like your husband, is being carried off, they don't stand up and go, wait a minute, you don't have the authority to do that. They just go, oh yeah, he's some scofflaw that needs to go to prison. So it's the slave on slave violence that keeps everybody in line. But I think the important thing is to slowly get this idea out. Well, it's slow at the moment, but I'd like it to go a lot faster. To really think about, well, wait a minute, who are these people, and what is their function actually, and what is their relationship to us? And there's a complete disconnect on that in most people's minds.
Yeah, so it kind of sounds like jury nullification is kind of educate. And what jury nullification is it's educating people about their right to basically decide the law, if the law is valid or not.
That would
well, that's one small piece of it, because the government, one of the things that the founders had said, okay, well, we'll put together a court system to settle disputes. Well, the disputes have to be real disputes between real people, okay? But it morphed into the dispute being, we, the government, get to decide how you live your lives, and if you disobey us, then we're going to punish you. Whereas the courts are actually supposed to administer disputes between real people who've allegedly harmed somebody. But now the concept of harm is out the window, and it's like, no, and now it's just a question of obedience.
Yeah, and also just they think that the harmed party
you hurt my feelings.
They think that it can be society, something completely undefinable like that. Like when I got a parking ticket, I asked who was the victim, and they couldn't answer me. They ended up throwing it out for a totally different reason, so they didn't have to answer those questions.
Yeah.
Well, the truth is out there, as they say. You just have to go look for it, and there's more and more people coming out with the idea that, wait a minute, all this evidence is there. There's a gentleman in Florida by the name of Heyman Modahere, who runs a series of seminars just talking about the income tax, going, well, actually, the income tax does not apply to 90+% of the people. And he's been giving seminars for quite a number of years, called the Freedom Law School, and that's just another facet of this whole big issue.
There's also Bear Arms in Massachusetts. He gives at least like presentations here in New Hampshire and maybe in Massachusetts too, and there are tons of convincing theories on why the average person doesn't actually owe quote-unquote federal income tax. And I totally believe that it's the case, but I think it all comes down to exactly what you're saying. The fact that other slaves, like the cops, are willing to enact violence on their fellow slaves, and just they keep the illusion going, and that's all it is. There isn't really actually laws written down that are completely valid and technically you're owned by the United States. There's not. It's just the fact that people go along with it.
This kind of makes me, we spend all this time like talking about avoiding or not having to pay income tax and what the law says. But honestly, I don't think I really care what the law says. This is a moral issue, and no law changes the fact that you're using violence to achieve. That's what states are. They're violent actors. Violent coercive actors, and you just can't justify that from a moral perspective. To get money out of people.
Right. Well, ultimately, that's the underpinning of the whole thing. But the idea of the government, at least as far as the United States was concerned, it was supposed to be because it flipped the model of we have the king who is the sovereign, and everybody else is just the servants of the king. Okay, and after the revolution, we say, okay, we're not going to have a king. We're going to be the kings, but we're going to hire these people to help help organize, administer the thing. In fact, I remember once I was was adjudicating a traffic ticket, and I asked the presiding officer. It wasn't a real judge. It was one of these commissioner type people. And I asked him, well, wait a minute, what kind of court is this? Is this a court of a criminal court, or is this a court, a civil? Is this a civil matter? And she said, no, it's an administrative court.
Wow.
Now,
I didn't know they
later
admit that.
on, I realized what I could have said, but she was telling the truth. My response should have been, wait a minute, are you under the mistaken impression that I work for the government? That I'm part of the administration and therefore subject to administrative law? This is the secret. And most of us have signed documents. We've said, oh, yes, are you a U.S. citizen? Well, sure. Okay. What's the definition of the word, this phrase United States? Well, guess what? If you look it up, it's actually a corporation based in Washington, D.C. So everybody who thinks they're a U.S. citizen is actually legally a citizen of Washington, D.C. And therefore, the government has plenary power over people in Washington, D.C. You have no constitutional right.
There's been some interesting stuff that's happened in New Hampshire in regards to administrative law and criminal law, and there was and I don't remember specifically. I wasn't even here actually at the time, but I here's what I remember of it. It was something along the lines of some sort of driving thing, and I think it might have had to do with the driver's license. And
yes, are you driving or are you traveling?
Well,
yes.
In either event,
driving is commercial.
Well, in either event, so this was Ian actually, who was the one dealing with this, but he was, I believe, charged with something, and he was found not guilty of the charge in criminal court, but then they brought administrative proceedings against him, and he was found guilty there, which is kind of interesting. But I think
the trick is.
Well, hold on. Let me finish.
Finish your
So,
sentence.
Yeah. So the problem is, I think what will happen is, if they have a criminal law that says you must get a driver's license, and you may not have done anything criminal. You may be found not guilty criminally, but the administration can then go and decide to take away your license or something along those lines. And I think that's kind of what happened with Ian's case.
Yeah, well, see, the problem is that when you go into court and you don't specify that you are not an employee of the system and not part of the system, they assume that they have jurisdiction. And unless you challenge jurisdiction, then you've got no hope. You basically got to go along with whatever they tell you.
I've seen others challenge or try to challenge administration, and I've never really seen that work. They've ultimately still ruled, and people have done everything from pretty much ignore. They show up, but they don't actually get before I'm trying to think what they call it, but they're basically with the rest of the population who is observing the trial, so they don't actually go past. I don't know what you call it, like
past the bar, so to speak.
Yeah, the door, the bar.
There's a whole lot
into what they call
hypotheses about.
Yeah, but anyway, the point is, I've never actually seen that play out successfully. I've seen the one case with a gentleman named Dick Marple, who's a 80-something-year-old
cross the bar.
Yeah,
That's what I was just
80-something-year-old state representative
in New Hampshire.
In New Hampshire, he actually did that, and he challenged, I believe, jurisdiction, and they still went through with the trial, and they did find him not guilty of one of the charges, but it wasn't because of like anything he did. It was because the prosecution was trying to go through the trial so fast because of how much trouble that Dick Marple was, that they forgot to introduce the driver's license or something along those lines. So
it's just like a technicality. That's kind of what they did to me. I made all these points and I moved to dismiss my traffic ticket on the basis of like specific things, but the judge ended up saying, yeah, I'm going to dismiss this, but it's just because of like something else, like
no,
they just don't want to answer your question.
What's interesting is, so Bonnie, your case, I think was, it's a good time to mute him. Your case, I think, was actually it definitely almost was like a sovereign citizen type of like argument almost, but it wasn't, in that you actually made a very valid legal argument in that they didn't, you questioned whether or not the law applied to the vehicle or the person who was driving it or the entity that owned it or something along those lines.
I asked if they had proof that I was driving the car.
Right. And they didn't know who the law actually applied to. So it was a very good argument to make. And they didn't present the law itself, and they didn't know. The judge didn't know. So ultimately, he had to rule on this. And since it was possible that the law didn't apply to you, because maybe it applied to the owner of the vehicle, but not the driver of the vehicle, or maybe it applied to the driver of the vehicle, but not the owner. And unless he had the law, he wouldn't know.
And basically, I also asked them to throw out the testimony of their only witness because of many things, including the fact that I asked, do you work for a corporation? And she said no. And I was like, okay, I moved to dismiss this woman and her testimony because of, or whatever the actual language is. I knew it at the time. Because of the fact that she didn't know the answer to that question was actually yes, that she works for the corporation that is Keene, New Hampshire. And the judge was like, move along, Miss Freeman. Like, it was just ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I think your situation was very much more of they didn't know whether or not the law applied to you or it applied to the corporation. Like, they didn't know.
See, that's what
and that's why
like
you
the
won.
Excuse he used. He didn't want to like answer any of my like important things. But
no, I get that, but that wasn't the thing that convinced him to rule not guilty.
Yeah, because if he would have been convinced by that, then he would be making like a big precedent.
I didn't. So I had a parking ticket case a number of years ago, and I definitely didn't argue like a sovereign citizen type of like argument, but one of the questions I did ask was something like, do I work for the city of Keene, or I asked, am I the city of Keene? Or something along those lines. And it sounded very much like a sovereign citizen question. Well, the reason I asked that question, though, was because they charged me under like Section B, which was the authorization to install parking meters, or for the city of Keene to install parking meters. Well, there was no penalty for violating Section B or whatever. So they found me not guilty, which I thought was interesting, but it wasn't that sovereign citizen type of like questioning jurisdiction. Really, it was questioning jurisdiction, but it wasn't like sovereign citizen type logic, I guess, if that kind of makes any sense.
Can I interject here for just a second?
Yeah, go for it.
The term sovereign citizen is definitely an op done by statists who want us to look ridiculous. There is no such thing as a sovereign citizen. It's an oxymoron. You're either a citizen or you're sovereign.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as the phrase conspiracy theorist, which was also created by statists to make us look ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I really would want to invite people not to use that term except in derision.
I understand where you're coming from, and I actually only learned that sovereign citizen was like a derogatory term recently. But I do understand that regardless of what you call the group of people who are making those sorts of arguments, there's another group of people, and I think they tend to be more the libertarians, that are making arguments that are more sound, but sometimes enter some of the same realms of jurisdiction types of questions. But they're not quite the same as the more crazy people that are making, or seemingly sounding crazy people, at least.
Well, I don't think it's nice.
Yeah,
to call
there are some arguments out there that really don't hold much water.
Yeah,
I like Mark Stevens' approach, where he basically cuts right to the quick and says, where is the witness who can come forward and state categorically he or she has personal firsthand knowledge that this alleged this statute or whatever it is, rule that I violated applies to me?
And also,
there can never be such a person.
He also asks them to bring forward like an injured party, which is what I was trying to get to the point of.
That's a second. That's a secondary approach.
I haven't seen. I've seen a lot of court cases in New Hampshire, and I've seen people do, the Mark Stevens kind of approach, I think, which may be a little bit more in the middle, but at the same time, I mean, I think a lot of the times it's certain questions from that kind of direction do actually have an effect. But it's not necessarily done in the way that Mark Stevens or somebody along that lines would do it. So it's kind of interesting. So it's like I feel like there is some argument to be had. I just don't know that the way it gets argued in practice when people are following that has worked.
Well, that's like partially what I was using with my traffic ticket, and I got trained by my neighbor who used to work for Mark Stevens, and he has lots of success under his belt, but in Missouri.
I think going in that direction of Mark Stevens, when you questioned, whether or not who was the person who was actually liable, right? I think that was in some sense going in that Mark Stevens direction, but I think that it is on solid legal grounds. Whereas I think the other question you asked sort of just gets written off whether or not it's on solid legal grounds or not. And so, ultimately at the end of the day, if the judge can't understand what you're trying to argue or whatever.
Oh, I think they understand. They just don't want to answer it. So
maybe, but it doesn't matter though. I think ultimately at the end of the day is there's certain things, arguing it from a certain direction is probably going to be more effective, than arguing it from a direction that maybe has a legally stronger argument, if that makes any sense.
So, Paul, are you familiar with Christopher Gronsky? We interviewed him a couple weeks ago. Are you familiar with his Destination Freedoms, correcting your citizenship status stuff?
Yes, I'm familiar with him. In fact, I did video of him under my Red Pill Recording YouTube channel when I was in New Hampshire a couple of years ago. Well, more than a couple of years ago now, but if you look on my Red Pill Recording YouTube channel, there's a whole bunch of New Hampshire videos on there that we did a number of years back. And there's also there's a guy who I would put your attention on. What's his name? Where is he? Just a second ago. Oh, here it is. Brandon Joe Williams. Okay. He has something called a contract killer course.
Oh, okay.
I advise people to look that up, although it's definitely not safe for work.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I know where I've heard of this before. Jay Noon, he used to be on the show on Thursdays. He has told me about this, and it has the F word in his URL, but I have heard of that guy. Yes. Okay, well,
but I've been listening to his material, and it's really very enlightening, and it has. I'm continuing to study his approach, which is very similar to what we've been talking about. But he starts talking about practical things like actually getting redoing your driver's license and redoing your passport, so I'm anxious to find out how that works out for me. He said the first step in that is you've got to get your long form birth certificate. But I invite anybody to go to that website, onestupidf.com.
Interesting. I haven't actually visited it yet. I asked you about Christopher Gronsky of DestinationFreedom.com or maybe it's .org, because I was going to say I actually know plenty of people who have corrected their citizenship status with him, and it's been successful. They have passports that they go out of the United States with. Ian, thank you so much for the call, Paul. It's an interesting conversation. 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live. More coming up. Don't go anywhere. It's Free Talk Live.
Hey, you are going to love the movie Victimless Crime Spree. It's hilarious, heartwarming, and carries a ton of inspiring freedom messages. Feeling down about the lack of liberty in your life? You need to put on this film with some friends and have a good laugh. It's a true story about me and my friends in New Hampshire living free, singing, dancing, and getting arrested. Of course, it's all on video, and the bad guys, the cops, judges, bailiffs, and sheriffs, they all play their part like it's out of a movie or something. You would think we scripted the whole thing, but it's real life. Go ahead and have a watch, and if it's been a while, have another look. I guarantee you'll notice things now that you didn't notice before. And the best part is that you're going to walk away feeling a renewed sense of your own power. You are the master of your destiny, and you will be free in your lifetime. Victimless Crime Spree.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm Sally Patterson. Donald Trump has chosen J.D. Vance as his running mate in America's 2024 presidential election. The former president made the announcement as Republicans gathered at the party's convention in the U.S. city of Milwaukee in Wisconsin. President Joe Biden's re-election campaign said Ohio Senator Vance will, quote, bend over backwards to enable Trump and his extreme MAGA agenda, even if it means breaking the law and no matter the harm to the American people. Caroline Malone reports.
Vance served in the US Marine Corps, ran a successful business, and has even written a memoir. The Trump campaign said he is a champion for the renewal of American manufacturing and has worked to defend and revive domestic automotive production. Vance has called for strong borders and for standing up to China. He's also a supporter of the traditional energy industry, oil and gas. Vance is a senator for Ohio, but does not have much other political experience. He's a young choice at just 39 years old.
At the convention, Trump also became the Republicans' official nominee. He's been the presumptive nominee for months, but has now secured the votes of enough delegates to lead the party into the general election. Meanwhile, a Florida judge has dismissed the criminal case against Trump on charges of mishandling top-secret documents. On Monday, Judge Aileen Cannon granted the defense motion to throw out the case because of how the special prosecutor was appointed. The ruling removes a major legal hurdle facing the former president ahead of November's election. Monday's events come just days after Trump survived an assassination attempt at a rally in the U.S. state of Pennsylvania. Investigations are underway into the possible motive behind the shooting, which killed one man attending the rally and critically injured two others. Benji Haya reports.
Whilst the politics plays out in Milwaukee, here in Washington, questions linger over how this shooting could have happened and why. The head of the Secret Service says her agency will comply fully with an independent review and congressional probes into Saturday's events, and that they're working to prevent an incident like this from ever taking place again. The Secret Service did kill the suspect, but only after he'd fired at Donald Trump. He also shot dead a bystander and injured others. Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas says the gunman should never have been allowed to get a direct line of sight to the former president, even from outside the rally's perimeter. The alleged assassin was 20-year-old Pennsylvania resident Thomas Matthew Crooks. His motive remains unknown. President Joe Biden's urging this fractured nation to resolve its differences at the ballot box, not with bullets, as he seeks to unite the country and avoid the bloodshed causing a cycle of violent vengeance and retribution.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com. freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, talk radio that you control, and 603-283-6160 is the phone number here. That's 603-283-6160. And it's officially unofficial. We've been podcasting since podcasts began, but we're launching a new podcast anyway. Our new podcast is a 30 to 45 minute show releasing once a week, and you can find it at freetalkcast.com. It's brought to you by the same people who bring you Free Talk Live, and we'd love for you to check it out. Again, that's freetalkcast.com. With you on Free Talk Live now is me, Bonnie.
And Mr. Penguin.
In the last segment, we had a caller who brought up a bunch of different subjects about the fact that the United States doesn't really have any jurisdiction over you. They're just a corporation. When you look into things, you find out that's true. Is it realistically how people treat you? No, because we have a bunch of slaves called cops that will shoot you for their masters, even if they know they're slaves too. Oh well, that's what we talked about in the last segment. Right now, Penguin, you have a story about Spain, and apparently they sentenced a bunch of school children to prison.
Well, not quite prison, but yeah,
Okay.
they did. Here's the title. It's so this is from the Guardian, and that's actually a UK outlet, I believe. So it's actually a kind of a weird story because this is not something I normally anticipate in Europe so much as the United States or the UK maybe. I think the UK is fairly
Bad about this kind of thing.
yeah, they're more conservative, I guess. Kind of, I don't know if it's
Save the children.
yeah, definitely
internet.
more along that line. But they're more conscientious about nudity. Is basically what it comes down to. Anyway, but a country like Spain is not. I don't get that impression.
Right, I wouldn't
France,
think they'd be known
Spain,
for
Germany.
Like the people on the beaches in those places are like going to be naked.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of nudist beaches, and even the non-nudist beaches have nudity, basically, at least by American standards. And so they tend not to freak out, in regards to nudity. They've got. I mean, I remember in France, in the subway station, there was nudity on the walls. Like posters, like in advertising and stuff, and on television there was nude television, like naked people on television during the day, during a daytime, like over the air, like broadcast television.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's why this is kind of a weird article. So anyway, the title of the article is Spain sentences 15 school children over AI generated naked images. I think this is also probably written from a very British perspective, which is also very close to an American conservative perspective, I think. So teenagers get each, and this is the very title says school children. And usually when I think of school children, I'm thinking of like elementary school, right? Prepubescent kids, not teenagers, which is kind of like it sounds more like worse than it is than when you actually get into the story. And I think that's intentional, the way they're doing that. So teenagers each given a year's probation after creating and spreading faked images of female classmates in Southwest Spain. So they're talking about like AI, artificial intelligence generated images. A court in Southwest Spain has sentenced 15 school children to a year's probation for creating and spreading AI generated images of their female peers in a case that prompted a debate on the harmful and abusive uses of deepfake technology. Now, one of the things I will say, though, is this is probably not to the same degree. Like, I think if something like this happened in the United States, they probably would have been like kicked out of school, or something more severe than this. So
I don't know. I just don't know, because it's like
I mean,
it's done outside of school, right? It's not done on a school computer during one of their classes, right?
Yeah, I mean, but they're arresting youngsters for like sexting and things like that in the United States.
Yeah, but this isn't even real images. It's AI. It seems like it should be covered under free speech.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a very controversial statement right there in the United States, at least.
Let's get into this, but first, it is a call-in talk radio show. I think we should get David in New Mexico's opinion, or whatever you wanted to talk about. David, what's on your mind?
I think it has. Well, in a minute, but what you're talking about right now, I think it has less to do with the nudity of those pictures than it has with damaging the persons. You know, the nudity is incidental. It's just a way in which you are hurting someone, and it could be that, or it could be something else.
Isn't that really societal as opposed to individually somebody's harming another person? I mean, if you think about it, because you're making the assumption that society will look down on that person as a result, but that's a sort of that's dependent on what society you're in, right? A society that doesn't look down on nudity isn't going to be somebody's not going to feel harmed by it, I guess is what I'm trying to say, right?
Well, they do, and they don't look down on nudity, and it has less to do with the nudity than. Let me back up. If you're not allowed here or there to take pictures of somebody naked without their or you can take them take pictures with their consent, but you can't distribute them without their consent. And that's what you're violating. And the fact that you're using AI to make it not really their body, it still is meant to represent their body. And so in the bottom line is it's kind of the same thing. And it's not the nudity that's at issue. It's that you didn't have permission to do that, whether it's their actual body or...
I think you might be onto something here, actually, because in Europe, they're very conscientious about privacy. So things like Google cars, for example, when they go around and they take pictures of people, they have to blur out the faces. And they do that in the United States now, but the whole reason they do that is because of European law being very, very in Europe they actually have a law called Right to be Forgotten. They have a law called Right to be Forgotten, where you have anything that's on any service, any of the mainstream services or not mainstream services. If there's anything about you on any of those services, you have the right to have it removed if you want to be forgotten. Yeah, with the exception of if you're, for instance, if it's a public record where for instance, you actually committed a crime and it's still pertinent, meaning you murdered somebody 4 years ago, that you can't get that removed. But if you did something, a misdemeanor 20 years ago, you can get that removed. Yeah, that sounds about right.
I think it's like 7 years.
And I think I think if you look at this, this is, and again, like I said, this is kind of a weird story because it's written from a British perspective, but about a school or young people in Spain. And I think if you look at like just the way it's being taken care of as a year probation as opposed to like jail time or something along those lines, because I think I think it's they're looking at this from a different that very perspective as more of a privacy, or I definitely can see this as being more of a privacy concern as opposed to a oh my God, there are some naked people, right? Like,
how is it a privacy concern when it's not a real picture of them naked? Like,
because it represents it's put out there to make it look like it is their real body.
They should have to prove that somebody believed it was really them and they were damaged.
Let's back up a moment. Let's back up a moment, Bonnie. I don't think it would have made it any difference whether or not these pictures that were posted were of them naked or not. Is kind of what it's coming down to, right? So they might have been punished for a year whether or not the pictures of the females were naked.
So if they just generated AI pictures of someone not naked, they would get a year of probation?
I think that's a possibility here.
Well, that's not right, at the very least.
From a libertarian perspective, from like a Western perspective, or at least a United States perspective, I think you're right. We wouldn't be we wouldn't be horrified by somebody posting some pictures, on the internet. But that's not the perspective that the Europeans are coming at it from.
Well, that's retarded. I just
well,
don't
it's definitely I think it's definitely a different perspective. But I can keep reading the article. All right, did you have anything else to say there?
I think he called about something else.
Okay.
You know what? I have more to say. I did call about something else, but I have more to say on what you're talking about. Chris, you were talking earlier about European sentiment about nudity, and I lived over there for a bit. In my observation, in the areas where, first of all,
where did you live exactly? Because there's differences between like the UK and like France, for sure, and mainland Europe.
In Switzerland, and then we traveled here and there. And when you go to a more Catholic area, then it's more conservative, more prudish, more you might not necessarily want to take your top or your suit off at the beach and go swimming without, or laying out on the beach without. But when you're in the less Catholic area, it's more acceptable. And then this also, if you're in the more rural you are, I'm not talking about if you're out in the woods in the middle, anywhere in Europe, if you're in the woods, where you're expect that you're alone and somebody comes along and you're naked, nobody's going to care. But if you're in a rural area where people are expected to be, walking along, and you decide to be naked at the beach, and you're in a, small town area, then it's less likely that they're okay with that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's the Catholic thing or not. Just because, so I don't know what specifically countries, we're talking about here, but like Italy, for example, I do believe it's fairly normal for people to be like naked at the beach. That is, I believe, a Catholic country. Am I not? And I think they're very strongly Catholic.
I feel like most European countries are like overall not very they are very secular at this point. Like, yeah, they're like historically we're all Christian, maybe mostly Catholic, but at this point in history, like, I don't think that's a huge motivating factor.
I don't know. Like, I haven't been to Italy. I've watched, I've seen, I've watched a lot of like foreign films. So like basically they're not targeted at the US market, but they have subtitles, right? So they don't have like dubbing or anything like that. And I don't know, like I just have noticed that there's a lot more nudity just about everywhere outside the United States.
Yes, that's so true. Like my I had a friend from Germany, and she was just like, we would go work out together at the gym, and we'd go to the dressing rooms, and I'd be like, just like not looking her directly in the boobs while getting undressed, and she'd always be like, are you embarrassed? You're embarrassed, aren't you? That's so American. Well, I'm just trying to like get dressed without looking at her, without her looking directly at me. I don't know. I
have a friend who moved from Spain to the United States, and he actually grew up in a quote unquote nudist like colony until he was like 6 years old. I don't think he said it on the air though.
Oh yeah.
And I just think that's like I don't even know what like Americans think or realize, but like there's people who live their lives and they just go around naked everywhere, and to them it's like normal, and like but for an American, and I know this exists in the United States too to some degree.
It's more rare, yeah.
But it's rarer. It's much more rare, and it's also much how do I say this? Hidden from public view, as so to speak. So it's not out there. It's something that nobody knows. Like, you go to work, nobody knows that you're a none of the people you work with are going to know that you're a nudist, or that you were at a nudist resort or something like that.
Well, moving on with the calls. Thank you for the call, David from New Mexico. We have TJ the Spy from Colorado. TJ, you're on Free Talk Live. What's on your mind?
Oh, not a lot, Bonnie. I was just calling in because I wanted to thank all the people of Free Keene who donated to Robin Hood for his parking meter escapades 10 years ago.
Nice.
Because they donated about 1/10 of a Bitcoin 10 years ago, 30 inputs. And James just recently found his blockchain wallet password. So he was able to log in, and he got like $6,000 worth of Bitcoin.
That's awesome.
Wow.
He definitely deserves
So a little,
it for that work.
little discovery. Yeah, it's like, never throw away your passwords or your keys, but it might be valuable someday. But I was calling because I want to come out as a nudist. I was there at the Body Freedom Village at Rogers Campground at the Porcupine Freedom Festival, and we were dancing naked to Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, which is some opera that he wrote a long time ago in 1913. And I was dancing there naked on nitrous and just thinking, this must be what it was like in the Garden of Eden, with Adam and Eve just standing there in front of God, not caring and not being ashamed to be naked. And it was wonderful. I thought this was just a absolutely marvelous experience, and everybody was drunk or on acid or something. But, I had a wonderful time.
I've never tried it.
The acid or
acid or being naked?
I've never tried acid or being naked platonically with a bunch of people dancing around a campfire.
Oh, well, you got something on your checklist you can do, because I've been raided by the FBI while on acid and naked.
Yes, you have.
And
Okay, I was naked when the FBI raided too, but that wasn't a choice or quite the same thing.
Yeah, I know Aria was ashamed to be naked. She's like, see, if I was Aria, I would have gone like, no, check it out. Here's what I got downstairs and upstairs. But she was like, no, I'm not gonna drop this towel. And I thought, oh goodness, we need to work on this, because I think nudity can be a weapon to the normies, the normal people in the government, especially the female police officers. When I was naked in the first FBI raid, she's like, oh my God. And when she saw me, and it's just like, female police officers do not know how to handle.
You raided someone's house, lady. You're mad that they have their genitals out when you raided their house?
I said I'm a naked gay dude, lady, not an armed suspect with a gun. So relax. But I wish I could have recorded that entire 3-hour escapade. They were there insulting me and James, and James and me. We were sitting there with Ian, and they're insulting us, and I'm insulting them back, and it was fun.
I wouldn't have described the FBI raid as fun. Maybe it would have been more fun.
Maybe if you were on acid and MDMA.
Yeah, the circumstances here I think were very different. They were you were raided with like bear tanks. They were raided with like a knock at the door. It was not quite the same. I do.
Yeah, they also separated us all, so that was not very fun.
Yeah. I think the situation was kind of different. In probably important ways. I don't think you guys ever, TJ, you didn't actually step on glass or anything like that, right?
No. It was all just knock, 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 and
so
enter, and we're coming in whether you want us to or not.
Yeah, there was more like physical violence involved in the raids with Bonnie
the Crypto 6.
And the Crypto 6.
So the lesson learned is you should always be awake at like 5:30 a.m. so you can be on the lookout. So if they do come, you can turn on the porch lights and say, "Welcome, guys." You could always just knock.
It kind of would have been dangerous if somebody would have ran downstairs in the second FBI raid, because they throw these heavy objects into the windows and then pull out the windows with it.
Yeah, I didn't. I was right across the street, and I stopped. I didn't cross the street because I was like, this isn't like the last time around. This is like they were ready to like kill people. With the second raid. In 2021, not the 2016.
And the FBI will never be held accountable for their excessive use of force.
Nope. What do you think?
Nope. We could always write our congressmen and say, "Hey, congressman, I think that you were a little heavy-handed here," and they can I'm sure they'll convene a Senate Judiciary Oversight Committee into the use of excessive force by the FBI. But
do you really think they will?
No, because unless you got $5,000 to donate to their campaign.
Yeah. They seem to be scumbags.
That's the thing.
Well, I mean, let's see. Are we
politicians? They got to know this. Politicians are all whores. They all want money, and as long as you got money, they're willing to be your friend. But if you don't have money, they're not interested in you.
I think at the state level, we probably could have something, but that wouldn't affect the feds. So,
yeah.
So,
well,
do you have any opinions on this case in Spain? These kids getting probation for making AI pictures of their female classmates naked?
Oh goodness. Well, that's kind of an interesting use of AI. I would say, goodness, I don't know what you could do. I hate to be as a libertarian. There needs to be a law to protect young children, but I said this is probably something better done in civil court. You know, the kid who made the AI could, be sued by the people like, hey, you used my image without my permission to make sexual pornography, and I think the jury would find in their favor.
Well,
in the female's
I don't even
favor.
know that this was pornographic. It was just they were naked, but I don't think it was pornographic necessarily here. It sounded like it actually comes off as a privacy issue, but with a British writer. This is in The Guardian, freaking out about it and almost making it sound like it was a problem because of the nudity, but it wasn't really a problem because of the nudity. It was more of a problem because of the privacy.
I think this is really messed up that people act like an AI generated image is like the same thing as someone taking a picture of you. When my sister was in high school,
I think we definitely overreact. Definitely.
My sister is 4 years younger than me, and there was this incident where a girl was trying to take a picture of her while she was taking a shower while they were on a sports trip. And basically what ended up being the case was that girl was paid $10 by a boy who said, I'll pay you $10 if you can get me a picture of one of the other girls from the volleyball team naked. And that is an actual violation of someone's actual privacy. And
that would be a crime. A conspiracy. A conspiracy.
Yeah, definitely.
He actually got charged with something for that. It was like the school versus him, not my sister.
Well, you know the other thing that just baffles my mind is there's all these laws to protect children, but we never ask the question: are we actually harming the children in the process? So, for example, okay, if we're going around arresting children, or what we're calling children, which really are mostly teenagers, for taking pictures of themselves and or their their lovers or whatever, right? I mean, is that really what we want? Do we really want to be locking up young people for things
the law is very clear. 18 USC section 2252. If you're under 18, so if you're 17 and a half and you take a picture of your junk, you can be charged with production and distribution
and that's the thing
of child porn.
That's the thing. These laws, they seem to be they're so extreme, and we never really think about the actual consequences of them. And it just comes off to me as they're so Orwellian. It's kind of like it's very much, it's not that different, I think, from the drug laws, like weed and things like that, especially a decade or two ago, right? It was just okay, even if there is a issue here, the extent to which we go after people, and then we go after people who are not even, the people who have, for example, with the weed, we're going after mom and dad because the car that the kid had weed in, they had the weed in the car and they take the whole car, right? It's so overblown.
Oh yes, well, civil asset forfeiture is just theft with a badge. It's not really theft because it's legal. They're doing it legally.
Yeah, and the laws should probably be changed. I don't think there's any chance that that's going to happen. Although
no, that's how a lot of these rural counties, they make their bread and butter off civil asset forfeiture.
Yeah,
I mean, when they see a nice Mercedes Benz coming through their county and it's doing 5 miles an hour over, or it crossed over the center line, is probable cause to pull it over, drug dog, alert, and they find a baggie of weed. We can civil asset forfeiture it. So they always look for the nice, expensive cars because those have high market resale value.
I know they did change the law, I think, in some states. I don't know if it was in regard to pornographic content or if it was in regards to just sex. But either way, basically, if you're within 4 years, and it might be a little different depending on the state, but if you're within 4 years, a 17 or 18-year-old won't be charged with
rape.
Right.
Well, that's the show, and I want to thank you, Bonnie, for letting me on, and I'll talk to you later.
Thank you for the call, TJ the Spy, and thanks everyone for listening to Free Talk Live. You can go to freetalklive.com for more. Thanks for listening, and peace.
This hour of Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. Rising fees have made Bitcoin useless for purchases, but Dash continues to have fees less than 1 cent per transaction, and its features ensure Dash is undefeated as the most useful cryptocurrency in the marketplace. From a technical standpoint, Dash transactions are irreversible, and its network is protected from 51% attacks by their Chainlocks technology. There's no need to wait for a confirmation before considering a Dash transaction complete, so it's great for merchants.